My brother, kowtow before me, the true Son of Heaven, and rise to a new world free of materialistic illusion, the emissary of light announced through the guard captain. His 2 stories high apparition projected from the captain's body stopped showering light over me and retrieved its hand, regarding me with a benevolent gaze, though the superiority it directed toward me was hard to miss. I stared blankly at the apparition before glancing around, feigning confusion as if wondering whether he was speaking to me. Then I warned him once again, "You're talking to me? Enough of your nonsense. If you're done performing your tricks, erase your influence from my citizens while I'm still being polite." Listening to me, the emissary of light was astonished, nearly yelping in disbelief, but remained stunned. This was the first time someone weaker than him had resisted his ability to turn a being into his follower by directly introducing faith into their will. Until now, he had believed resistance was impossible unless he lacked the required faith, or the target surpassed him in strength. Today, however, this southern hope was different. He appeared entirely unaffected, as though he had not even sensed the skill's presence. He would be lying if he said he wasn't worried, as the guard captain looked a little panicked. Seeing the emissary of light stunned, I couldn't help but subtly before yelling at him impatiently. "What are you spacing out for? You charlatan? Quickly, let go of them. If anything happens to them." The emissary of light cut me off mid-sentence, once again stretching his hand above my head and chanting aloud, "I, the true Son of Heaven, guide you back to the embrace of heaven, freeing you from these materialistic illusions." Soon, I was bathed in another wave of light showers. This time as well, I let it be and did not resist. The result was the same as before. It was unable to break through the protective covering of my primordial calamity, Soul Gem. However, one thing had changed. After using his ability on me, the emissary of light yelled, "Kowtow before me, you heathen. Your sins are too deep to be washed away at once." "Cut it out," I shouted, before rushing forward and grabbing the guard captain by his neck, uttering, "You brought this on yourself. I warned you enough times. Since you aren't willing to listen to my words, I will no longer be polite." Seeing me grab his neck without giving him time to react, the emissary of light was shocked, realizing something wasn't right. How come the Southern Hope suddenly felt a lot stronger, unlike he previously perceived? Before he could resist, I poured my celestial power directly into the guard captain's divinity, mimicking the same method the emissary of light used with his I have no idea what it's called ability to turn beings into his diehard followers/believers. The emissary of light was not physically present, so it had been difficult to hack his grimoire and thoroughly learn his origin card and its abilities, even to determine the ability's name. Whatever it was called, Hive Spirit had recorded its data. Using the data gathered for soul division and healing, it replicated a version I could use, powered by celestial energy instead of faith, as originally intended. However, my version only empowered the target's willpower, therefore I called it the Celestial Empowerment. It did not implant faith toward me, unlike the emissary of light's ability. It was also not as showy as the original. After all, faith and celestial power were inherently different, even though all stemmed from primordial energy. Now, that made it tricky for me to use my empowerment against the original version. "How are you able to use my divine enlightenment?" the emissary of light uttered, sensing my celestial empowerment flooding the guard captain's divinity. With that, he began to struggle vigorously, but found that he could not break free of my grip on his neck, nor could he access the guard captain's soul energy, rule power, or grimoire, as they were restricted by the celestial blood fate domain. All he had was his faith. Otherwise, he would never have been able to infiltrate the celestial blood fate domain and project his soul projection through the guard captain. However, after sensing the difference between my celestial empowerment and his divine enlightenment, he smirked. It's just a cheap knockoff of divine enlightenment. But this proves it. The rumors about you didn't do justice to your genius and brilliance. You aren't just the future of the southern region, but the entire card world. Unfortunately, we were born on different sides of the border. It's such a pity. I would have loved to get to know you and work with you for the sake of our Almighty Father, the Card Celestial. I frowned as I listened to the emissary of light, noting that his arrogance had not diminished even after I gave him a taste of my strength. I wondered where his confidence stemmed from when I could clearly sense my celestial empowerment clashing with his divine enlightenment within the guard captain's divinity. That realization lifted a weight from my mind. I had been worried that I might foolishly end up empowering the faith implanted in the guard captain's will along with his will itself, which would only strengthen the emissary of light's hold over him. However, that did not happen. As it turned out, celestial empowerment functioned strictly according to my will. Sensing my intent to oppose the emissary of light's divine enlightenment, it empowered only the part of the guard captain's will that resisted the implanted faith. That resistance was small and weak, incapable of doing anything on its own. But once reinforced by celestial empowerment, it began to fight back harder than ever before. Seeing that my plan was working, I began to pour in more celestial power. Just then, I felt the emissary of light tighten his grip on my hand that was clutching his neck, squeezing it until it nearly burst into a bloody pulp. Seeing the emissary of light display such strength within my celestial blood fate domain, my eyes widened in astonishment as he forced his way through the domain's power. He broke its restriction on the guard captain's access to soul energy, rule power, and grimoire, then crushed my hand that was gripping his neck into a bloody pulp. Behold, heathen, this is the power the All-Father bestowed on me, his one true son. Rejoice as you get to die through his miracle. I will pray to my Father that your soul will be spared from eternal damnation. The emissary of light shouted, freeing himself from my grip. He then watched me, instantly healing my crushed arm with no effort. I appeared as good as new. Tisk. He couldn't help but click his tongue in annoyance. His miracles did not come cheap. Each one consumed a vast amount of faith. Forcing his way past the restriction on the guard captain's access to soul energy, rule power, and grimoire, then crushing my hand that gripped his neck into a bloody pulp, had been especially costly. Seeing that it had not even managed to truly injure me left him dissatisfied. Though he had amassed a tremendous amount of faith within his origin card, he was saving it to become the true son of the card celestial. That goal was not merely expensive. It was staggeringly so. He was not even certain he could gather enough faith to achieve it. Maybe if he were to turn the citizens of all 5 regions into his followers, then he might be able to accumulate enough faith over a decade. Therefore, he used his faith as sparingly as possible. The emissary of light gracefully cleaned the blood staining the guard captain's body, using his cleaning card as precaution. After all, he was in a blood domain. That too a celestial rule domain at that. He soon learned that crushing my hand that was using the celestial empowerment on the guard captains did not stop me from continuing to empower the guard captain's will against his divine enlightenment. The guard captain and the other demigods were still within my celestial domain. Using it as a medium, I simultaneously applied my celestial empowerment to all of them. Under its influence, the guards who were still kneeling within the domain suddenly let out gut-wrenching screams as their willpower, strengthened by my celestial empowerment, purged the faith implanted within them. Once I confirmed they were free of the emissary of light's faith, I lifted my celestial domain's restriction on each of them and ordered, retreat, fall back. Following my command, the demigod guards who had wanted to fight the emissary of light alongside me retreated instead. They were still muddled and powerless after awakening from what felt like an eternity, dreaming of versions of themselves willing to sacrifice everything for the emissary of light, doing SHD they weren't proud of. They clearly weren't in shape to fight, so they chose not to hinder me. Since I had been able to free them from the emissary of light's influence, they believed I could do the same for their captain. I then fixed my gaze on the emissary of light. He was struggling to move as his influence over the guard captains will continue to weaken as my celestial empowerment fought his divine enlightenment to bitter end, hindering his ability to maintain his soul projection through him. Considering the amount of soul energy I had used solely on the guard captain, he should have awakened from the emissary of light's influence like the other guards. However, the emissary of light's soul projection made it difficult for the guard captain to completely root out the faith embedded in his will, as his divine enlightenment was constantly pressing against it despite my celestial empowerment. I had no intention of backing down. Now that the guards were awake, my celestial power was free to supply entirely to the guard captain. I planned to fight the emissary of light's divine enlightenment to the bitter end with my celestial empowerment. No matter how much celestial energy I devoted to my celestial empowerment on the guard captain, the emissary of light spared enough divine enlightenment to match it. I was even forced to borrow celestial power from the card celestial. This made me wonder just how much faith the emissary of light had accumulated in his reserves. Then a thought lodged itself in my mind. My livestream plan to expose the emissary of light might have backfired. How so? I blamed the audience from the Empire. Witnessing the struggle between the two of us, their faith in him was being tested, yet most remained resolute. With all these factors combined, the emissary of light was receiving a sudden influx of faith. I even feared that his struggle against me was not consuming his faith, but instead adding to his reserves. Damn these fanatics. I cursed inwardly as I studied the emissary of light's expression and realized he was feigning struggle. He had already seen through my plan. My celestial blood domain was not truly restricting him, and he had also sensed the sudden influx of faith. Given that, it was no surprise he had caught on by now. From the looks of it, he was hatching his own plan to harvest even more faith from his fanatic followers. That was why he was putting on such a convincing display of resistance, pretending to be cornered and helpless. Seeing that I had caught on to his plan, the emissary of light met my gaze with a faint, almost reverent grin. Then he cried out, his voice carrying a finality that made the heavens tremble, "Let there be light." In the next instant, a blinding, overwhelming golden radiance erupted from the guard captain's body. It surged upward like a divine catastrophe, condensing into a towering golden apparition of himself vast enough to blot out the sky. My celestial blood fate domain screamed as it was torn apart, its crimson glow shredded and erased as the golden light flooded the land, drowning everything beneath its brilliance. The world itself seemed to submit, crimson swallowed whole by gold. I watched as the emissary of light tore my celestial rule domain apart using nothing but his faith. The spectacle was so overwhelming that he generated twofold or more the faith he had originally gathered to destroy my celestial blood fate domain. All of it was thanks to my dumbass belief that I could use the live stream to expose him to the 5 regions and deal a massive blow to his faith farming. Instead, he proved that the supreme leader and the matron had been right all along. They had never tried to expose him as a mere card apprentice who was lucky enough to forge a powerful origin card, pretending to be the celestial herald while going around deceiving people and abusing their trust to farm and harvest as much faith as possible, turning his lie into truth. Behold, you heathen, this is the power my father gave me. As long as I am alive, I shall not allow any evil to corrupt his land. In the name of my almighty Father, I hereby sentence you to death, the emissary of light said aloud, his voice carrying absolute certainty, as the golden apparition continued to pour out of the guard captain's body. I watched it swell and rise, swallowing the man whole, growing larger and larger with him at the center until it towered above everything around us. A colossal figure of pure light that burst through the clouds, standing there like the tallest skyscraper defying the heavens themselves. The demigods and others watching had to run, clearing the area to make room for it. Infidel, no matter your sins, you are still the creation of my Father. So, I will generously allow you to say your last words. The towering apparition of the emissary of light announced grandly. Its voice rolled across the sky, each word crashing down with the weight of thunder. Yet, somehow when it fell on others' ears, it sounded benevolent. I lifted my brows and tilted my head up to look at the massive apparition. Beside it, I was nothing more than a speck of dirt. Still, I wasn't impressed. What it did make me wonder, though, was just how much the emissary of light's faith revenue had increased because of a live stream. For him to be willing to spend so much of it just to deal with me, put on a display like this. That thought stirred a flicker of curiosity, but I pushed it down just as quickly. I did not want to know. It would only hurt, especially knowing this was the result of my own mistake in underestimating his soul projection. His faith truly let him do anything, as long as there was enough of it. What happened, heretic? Have you lost your words at the sight of my father's might? The emissary of light asked, bursting into loud laughter before continuing his taunts. Where's that sharp tongue of yours now? Did the cat get it? I quietly watched as the emissary of light farmed faith at my expense, bidding my time, wanting to see how long he could sustain this gigantic form of his. His farming a little longer did not matter much. I knew that over his decades of reign over the empire, he would have accumulated a massive reserve of faith, and adding a few more to it a few minutes longer would not matter to the situation right now, as it wasn't detrimental to his life. Since he was not physically present and was only using a soul projection, what could actually change the outcome for me was how hard he would fall when the time came. As the saying went, the bigger they were, the harder they fell. That was to say, the only way I could hurt him now was by sowing a massive seed of doubt in his followers' hearts. From my observations, I had learned that the followers he forcefully recruited through his divine enlightenment did not give him faith. He could only harvest faith from his true believers, not from those he had coerced into following him. Otherwise, with his level of strength, he would have already turned most of the 5 regions into his followers using his divine enlightenment by now. That was why he was so obsessed with creating spectacles and performing miracles. That was also why, at this very moment, he was not hesitating to dig deep into his reserves to manifest this gigantic projection to deal with me as grandiosely as possible. After all, it was a one-time investment. It would not only increase his influx of faith in the present, but also create new believers, permanently boosting his faith income while paving a royal road into the 5 regions' population. So I remained calm, letting him continue to farm faith, waiting to act only when his harvest reached its peak. I let him believe he was not only going to win, but that he was going to make a killing. Just as I expected, he was squeezing me for everything I was worth, determined to milk this situation for its full value. This was a godsend opportunity for him. If he made proper use of it, he would be able to turn the entire population of the 5 regions into his followers far faster than he had previously assumed. Don't tell me you are too paralyzed by the fear of being judged for your sins to even say your last words. Sigh, as expected of a heretic, cowardly. Unfortunately, it is too late for you to repent now, the emissary of light said, letting out a long sigh as he shook his head, wearing an expression of mercy and love for his father's creation. Then he went on to declare, "Your very existence is an insult to my father. I shall correct it." With a motion heavy with authority, he raised his colossal golden fist and extended a single index finger toward me, piercing through the clouds, bearing down as though he meant to crush my very existence with one finger of his, showing his followers just how powerful the Lord they chose to trust in was. The golden index finger came down on me, as though the sun itself were descending to crush me. I took it as my cue that the emissary of light had reached the peak of faith he could wring from this display, and that he now intended to kill me to push it even further. I let out a chuckle before unleashing my 4th transformation, the Viltronian Calamity Titan, in my 1000 curse incarnation. He wanted to turn this into a war of good versus evil. Fine, I would give him exactly that, where the victorious one was the good, and while the defeated one was the evil. That was a universal truth. My body rapidly grew in size, expanding at a pace faster than the naked eye could follow, as my innate calamity, the world-devouring plague, oozed out of my swelling form. The moment the emissary of light's index finger struck my world-devouring plague, it was immediately infected. The plague began to eat away at the faith sustaining his form, even as my body continued to expand, soon overtaking his height. In no time, the immediate vicinity around my growing body was completely filled with my innate calamity, the world-devouring plague, spreading alongside my growth until the emissary of light was fully submerged within it. My innate calamity, the world-devouring plague, had once been able to fight daily on equal terms. Granted that back then she was still a celestial array spirit and not yet a true celestial. That fact alone did not change the reality that she had been far stronger than the present emissary of light. When even she had struggled against my world-devouring plague, he stood no chance unless he intended to empty his entire faith reserve in this single battle. And if he did that, he would have no choice but to abandon his ambitions of world domination and go into hiding, because the masters would never let go of such an opportunity to root out a potential future threat. Soon, my figure grew to 8 times the height of the emissary of light and still showed no sign of stopping. Meanwhile, he struggled against the world-devouring plague, trapped quite literally beneath my vast shadow. That shadow plunged the entire city below into darkness, blocking out the moonlight, while the radiance of the emissary of light was steadily swallowed by my innate calamity. Was I afraid that revealing my innate calamity, the world-devouring plague, would make the card celestial wary of me? No, I wasn't. The card celestial was far too intelligent for such narrow-mindedness. I wasn't being a kiss-ass. It was simply the truth. I say this because the world calamity seed and the dungeon calamity seed were products of the dungeons themselves and had existed for a very long time. There were numerous records among card apprentices of dungeon calamity trees reaching their third and even fourth forms. Yet the card celestial had never taken action against them. Instead, the card apprentices or the supreme beings would step in, dealing with them and disposing of them with care. What did this tell you about the card celestial? It knew that these dungeon calamity trees or world calamity trees would never grow strong enough to threaten it within the ecosystem it had painstakingly created. Rather, they would eventually become nutrients for it. And even if one came close to becoming a genuine threat, the card celestial would act without hesitation, as it did in the case of Slay and her stake forged from a ruler-class world calamity tree branch. As for me, I was still far from being a threat to it. I couldn't even defeat the celestial array spirit Dahlia, let alone the card celestial, a veteran true celestial. If not for her willingly accepting my primordial calamity daughter gem and becoming my kin, that battle would have ended with my defeat and the field marshal's death. Even now, I was still nowhere near being a threat to the card celestial. Not to mention, it had already shown its approval of me carving my own path as a newborn celestial, albeit a hybrid one. That was why I wasn't afraid of revealing my innate calamity, the world-devouring plague, to it. What heresy is this? How can such an abomination exist? The emissary of light yelled in shock as my growth spurt finally came to a halt, my body rising taller than a mountain. More than 1,000 heads and pairs of hands floated behind my form as part of me, while my entire body was shrouded in my red innate calamity, the world-devouring plague. The red plague churned around me from top to bottom, and combined with my towering form, it made it impossible for anyone to see me clearly. All they could make out was a silhouette with 1,000 heads and countless arms, hidden deep within a sea of red fog. Not just them. From up here, even I could only vaguely make out their forms with my naked eye unless I enhanced my vision with soul energy. This was the first time I had ever publicly unleashed my complete true form. I felt liberated and all-powerful. I suppose this was the world calamity tree, celestial, Voltronian part of me. Fortunately, there was still my human side, keeping me grounded and humble, not letting me lose myself to this power or allow it to corrupt my mind. I recalled an old saying. There was always a taller mountain out there. This power might place me at the top of the food chain in the card world, but out in the myriad realms, I was still back at the beginning. Heresy? Abomination? I said with a chuckle. My dear nephew, I am your Uncle Wyatt. Did your father not tell you about me? Then my tone hardened as I warned the emissary of light. Be a good little boy and leave that poor man's body. And go wait for me at the Empire. Don't make me come over there right now. This better be good, Anna said aloud as she entered her mother's personal garden, where the southern princess appeared to be enjoying late-night tea, with and serving her like a palace maid. Seeing her mother gracefully sip her tea without sparing her a glance, Anna did not grow furious. She was used to it. Instead, she turned to the middle one of them triplets and remarked in disgust, He trusted you. I trusted you. You trusted me? That's rich, and replied indifferently, but stopped mid-sentence, unwilling to start something that would ruin her mother's late-night tea. She then glared at Anna, warning her to remain quiet and not disturb their mother's rare free time. Fine, maybe I didn't, but he trusted you. He trusted you because of me. Was all of that an act? Were all those memories fake? Anna grew emotional. Though she and Anne had their differences, having shared their most beloved and darkest thoughts, emotions, and secrets with one another, Anna had come to accept her as more than her origin card, as her sister. The thought that Anne had only been following her mother's orders all this time unsettled her deeply. The only reason Anna was able to process and adapt to this truth without crashing out was that this was not the first time her mother had pulled this kind of crap. Back when she was a little kid, her mother had demigod guards morph into children and become her friends, all while guarding her, keeping tabs on her, and, most disturbingly, using peer pressure as a teaching tool. Her mother had pulled such stunts so often that they felt more manipulative than relatable, and it only stopped when Anne was born. Why didn't I realize this sooner? It finally dawned on Anna that her mother hadn't stopped pulling that crap because she trusted her or because Anna had grown, but because she had found herself a very loyal double agent. And, realizing this, Anna glared at and, wondering if everything Anne had shared with her was fake, fabricated to give her a false sense of closeness. Thinking this far, Anna shook her head hard, stopping herself from overthinking and spiraling down that rabbit hole. He trusted me because of you? Don't kid yourself. Besides, he didn't trust me. That's why I had to give him all that attention, and that was all it took. After all, every boy or man wants one thing, and it's disgusting. And said begrudgingly, trying to imagine how she could have used all the time she had wasted on Anna's fiancé on her mother instead. Then she decided it had all been worth it, since it had helped her mother a great deal, and no longer dwelled on it, and was even glad that it had finally come to an end. Now, she could focus entirely on her mother while thinking about how to trick Anna into letting her out permanently before her 4-month term was over. Then wash it. A familiar yet distinct voice commented on Anne's remark. It was Anne, the third and youngest of the triplets, and was both shocked by the former's presence and bewildered by the latter's response, blurting out, "What?" Even the southern princess, who had been trying to enjoy her tea while ignoring her daughter's bickering, nearly spat it out through her nose and mouth, completely taken aback by the reply and breaking her perfectly graceful yet nonchalant vibe. I said, "If yours is disgusting, then you should wash it," and repeated, then added with clear disdain, "They write poems about virgins' pussies, calling them pure and all that SHD. But you say yours is disgusting. Lord only knows what you two, mother and daughter, have been up to behind closed doors. How dare you sully our mother like that?" And thundered, dashing at Anne, forgetting all her previous poise and grace. However, before she could even reach her, an invisible force smashed into her face, caving her skull in as her body was launched backward like a cannonball, only coming to a halt after crashing into the palace walls. Anne was far from done. She rushed forward, planning to finish Anne off for betraying and exploiting her beloved's trust. She now blamed Anne for her beloved's disheartening rejection of her heartfelt confession. In her mind, she justified his reaction to her and her love, thinking that she would have responded the same way after learning how and had betrayed his trust by spying on him and helping their mother stay one step ahead of him. However, before Anne could reach and a figure flashed between them, catching Anne in time and stopping her from killing Anne. It was Colleen. She had rushed over after sensing Anne's killing intent. Quickly realizing that her granddaughter's physical strength far surpassed her own, she was forced to mobilize her divinity's innate ability, freezing and within her embrace. Her hard-earned cultivation did not compare to the unparalleled bloodline's physical prowess. Leaning close, she whispered into Anne's ear, "Calm down, baby girl. You can't kill her. What if Wyatt wants a foursome with the three of you? You wouldn't deny him that opportunity, would you?" And stopped struggling in Colleen's embrace, apparently accepting her logic and finding it sound. Colleen knew her youngest granddaughter had been born from Anna's extreme fixation on their beloved, so she tailored her persuasion accordingly. Seeing that and was under control, Colleen signaled the royal and palace guards to return to their posts at once and not speak of what they had witnessed. That part went without saying, but what Colleen specifically meant was that no one was to spread word that there were now 3 Annas. Still holding and in her embrace, Colleen walked toward the gazebo where her daughter was having tea, while her daughters had nearly killed one another. Turning to Anna, she asked, "So, what did you name this one? Don't tell me it's anal, but it would suit her foul mouth though." "Unfortunately, no. I saved it for the next one, but this one is called and heat send. She will kill us all for Wyatt. And as you just saw, she has the strength to do exactly that. So watch your backs when you go to sleep tonight," Anna remarked, delivering the last sentence while staring at Anne, who walked over as her face healed at a visible rate. Anne's extreme shattering punch had done a huge number on her, and had created and mastered this fist technique to break the mystic dimension seal and meet her beloved. "Grandma, tell your daughter to stop putting on airs and tell me how to change Wyatt's mind about those 2 women," Anna said impatiently. She watched her mother, who had urgently baited her over here by claiming she would help convince her young groom to choose her and ditch the other two, now sipping tea as if she had all the time in the world. I still don't understand why the two of you can't get along. I would give the rest of my life just to have a few minutes with my mother, Colleen said. Even as she spoke, she knew her daughter's parenting had not been the best. Despite all of them being around to mitigate and help her, she had somehow managed to make her eldest daughter hate her, and perhaps even the youngest. Grandma, you're an orphan. Shouldn't you consider finding out who your mother was first? And pointed out from within Colleen's embrace, causing the latter's hand to coil around her neck, nearly choking her to death. Regaining control of her emotions, Colleen told her eldest granddaughter, "Retrieve her into your card. That mouth of hers will get her, or you killed out here." "I can't. She's stronger than me," Anna lied, throwing her hand into the air, only for and to exclaim, "Say what now?" "I said she's stronger than me, so I can't retrieve her into my origin card at my whim," Anna repeated, ignoring her annoyance, and asked, "How is that possible? I used to be stronger than you, yet I was trapped in your origin card by you for decades. It's my fault. I wasn't clear. She's not just stronger than me, but way stronger than me." In her obsession to see Wyatt and confirm his well-being, she combined her mastery of the extreme path and her know-how in the martial path to create the extreme shattering fist art. The only reason she's here and not rushing to Wyatt's side is because she wants to know how to get Wyatt to forget the other two women and me and focus only on her, Anna explained. Except for the part about not being able to force and into her card, everything was true. Even the part about being unable to forcibly retrieve and into her origin card, since the latter was indeed stronger than her. Yet she was able to withdraw and into her origin card anytime she wanted because of the wager she had won against the latter. It allowed her to retrieve and back into her origin card at will. She only realized this after understanding that the oath she and had taken for the wager contained major loopholes that worked to her advantage. Even and had no idea about this yet. She was saving it for the moment and lost control. Meanwhile, Colleen turned to her daughter and asked, "You said that their love for each other, if true, would help her turn normal. Then why does she still continue to hate you with the passion of 1,000 suns?" "That's because Wyatt made her recall her love for him, while I couldn't. As she subconsciously keeps resisting, she doesn't want to recall that part of her," the Southern princess answered, her voice steady. "It only proves that I failed as a mother." "No, mother, you didn't fail as a mother," and cried out. "Everything she is, and everything we are today, is because of you. And honey, you're confusing giving birth with parenting. Even monsters can give birth. However, they cannot be parents and raise their child as a mother. In that area, I too failed. I find no shame in accepting it, because you all grew into great adults despite me. So neither should you, my daughters," the Southern princess said as she rose from her chair and moved toward the youngest, intending to hug her, welcoming her into the family. However, the latter impatiently snapped, "Enough with your cringy sob stories, and tell me how I can get Wyatt to forget the other women and revere only me." The Southern princess frowned, listening to her youngest's words and noticing the manic glint in her eyes. She then warned her eldest, "Anna, don't release this one out of your grimoire under any circumstances unless it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, she might destroy everything Wyatt values and holds dear just so he'll finally see her. That includes you. This time, you really drew the short straw with this one." "Why you?" and was about to attack the Southern princess with killing intent after hearing her advice to Anna. But Anna immediately recalled her in her origin card. "Uh-huh. I knew you were lying to me just to mess with me," and exclaimed, pointing at Anna, only for the latter to shrug and reply, "I wasn't lying. If you're a lot stronger than me, you can resist my control over the origin card. But believe what you want. And, honey, she isn't lying about that," the Southern princess added, hoping the latter would grow stronger than Anna and eventually fight for her freedom. "You guys need to see this," Colleen suddenly blurted out, sharing the Western princess's live stream with Anna and the other two. "Aren't those our soldiers? Why are they fighting Wyatt? What's going on? I need to get there right now," Anna exclaimed in distress. Her thoughts were in disarray. She wanted to know what was happening, and at the same time, she wanted to rush to her young groom's rescue. "No, stay put. Wyatt can handle this himself. Also, look at those guards' eyes. They are no longer our guards, but the emissary of Light's believers. Why is he targeting Wyatt of all people? And why now of all times? The Southern Princess immediately deduced, based on what she had learned from Clown Mask's memories and her own independent investigation into the emissary of Light's origin card. Mother, contact Matriarch Malvin of the unstoppable Auriculian family. I need to know everything she knows about the Empire's current activities and why they would target Wyatt. Despite what Clown Mask's future vision had shown, the Southern Princess had always believed that in the current era, especially with a second demon invasion on the verge, the emissary of Light was the greatest threat to all 5 regions. Mother, what did City Lord Malvin say? The Southern Princess asked her mother impatiently. The reason the princess hadn't contacted the city lord of the border city herself and had instead asked the queen to do so was simple. The latter hated her with a passion but got along excellently with her mother. The reason for that was equally simple. She was a diplomat, while her mother was the soldier queen. What was more unsettling was that they had once been friends, but everything changed between them the moment she became a diplomat. However, considering the history of the unstoppable Auriculian family in the southern region, this was hardly surprising. She said this might be related to the saintess of demigod Michel Angelo Godson's church, who was responsible for protecting the broken runes of demigod Michel Angelo and was supposedly assassinated last month during the church's explosion. Now, there's chatter among the Empire's citizens that the saintess isn't dead, but deliberately faked her death to steal the relics and broken runes of demigod Michel Angelo. Because of that, the Pope of demigod Michel Angelo's church has just announced the absorption of their church into the emissary of Light's church, acknowledging him as the true son of the heaven and publicly begging the emissary of Light to help them find the traitorous saintess and retrieve their relics. She believes this is why the emissary of Light's followers are in Sky Blossom City, and possibly other cities as well, trying to track down the saintess, Colleen answered, her eyes still glued to the live stream, envying her grandson-in-law's celestial rule domain. Right now, he looked more like a demigod than she ever had, subduing more than a dozen demigods with a single word. Who wouldn't be drawn to such power? I see. What does she think about this info? Did the saintess who had been guarding the relics and broken runes of demigod Michel Angelo for millennia now actually steal them? Or is there more to it? The Southern Princess asked, even though she had already guessed what was going on. After all, she had been monitoring the political shifts within the Empire even before becoming the Southern region's diplomat. After noticing that worshippers of the first demigods were steadily decreasing, switching instead to follow the emissary of Light. By now, the emissary of Light's church had completely absorbed the other churches and held absolute dominion over the Empire far sooner than it had in Clown Mask's future vision, where the saintess had actually died in the church explosion and demigod Michel Angelo's relics and broken runes were formally offered to the emissary of Light by the Pope of Michel Angelo's church. Well, she believes that the Pope has been conspiring with the emissary of Light for quite some time now. He hired an assassin from the 5 regions to kill the saintess. That way, he could offer the relics and broken runes of demigod Michel Angelo to the emissary of Light in exchange for a higher rank and greater authority within the new parish. Secondly, it would give Michel Angelo a reason to start a crusade against the 5 regions and rake in faith through a battle framed as good versus evil. However, the saintess miraculously not only survived but also escaped the Empire, completely ruining their conspiracy. Therefore, they cooked up the story about the saintess faking her death, betraying the Michel Angelo church, and stealing the relics and broken runes of demigod Michel Angelo. This way, no one would believe her if she dared to foolishly come out of hiding and confess the truth to the citizens of the Empire. This was also why they hurriedly absorbed the Michel Angelo church into the emissary of Light's church, despite strong resistance from the older generation. They even executed them publicly just last night, labeling them as heretic sympathizers, Colleen revealed, relaying everything she had learned from the city lord of the border city. Colleen actually marveled at how accurate City Lord Malvin's deductions were. Having seen Clown Mask's future vision, they were no strangers to the conspiracy between the Pope of the Michel Angelo Church and the emissary of Light. What they hadn't anticipated was that, due to the anomaly in the timeline, matters within the Empire had already developed to this extent. The fact that most trusted members of the royal family knew about Clown Mask, while the city lord of the border city had no knowledge of it, spoke volumes about the royal family's opinion of the unstoppable Orcelian family. They believed the other side harbored too many grievances and dissatisfactions toward the royal family to be trusted. That wasn't to say they hadn't attempted to mend the relationship between the two families. The royal family had once assigned the current city lord Malvin as the Southern Princess's royal guard, but she left when the Southern Princess chose to become a diplomat, stating that her duty lay with the Southern region's royal family and its citizens, not with the damned ministers who lined their pockets by cheating their ruler and tormenting the citizens they were supposed to serve. It seems the time anomaly that originated with Wyatt didn't spare anyone. Everyone has fallen prey to it, the Southern Princess muttered. Having thoroughly seen Clown Mask's future vision, it wasn't hard for her to figure out that the variations in the timeline all stemmed from Wyatt and were now slowly affecting the entire card world. So far, it had brought more good than bad to the Southern region, but she worried that their reckoning might not be far off. Hopefully, they could survive it and shine brighter. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a change in the live stream, causing her to frown. Seeing the golden radiance bloom in the guard captain's eyes as he defied her son-in-law's celestial rule domain and stood firmly on his feet, she instantly knew that the emissary of light himself had arrived. "That's the emissary of light's soul projection," and exclaimed, watching the golden apparition form above the guard captain. Hearing this, Anna quietly hurried out, planning to go rescue her young groom. Even though he wanted her to share her marital bed with 2 other women, she was still willing to rush to his rescue without hesitation. She loved him too much to let go over such a small disagreement between them. She believed that, given time, she could change his mind and become the only woman in his heart. Even if she couldn't stand the thought of a future without her young groom by her side. "Where do you think you're going, young lady? Get back here," the Southern Princess said, as the palace guards and her royal guards emerged from hiding and stepped into Anna's path, blocking her. "Get out of my way. I'd hate to hurt you guys," Anna warned the guards, who were like elders to her, regretting that she had already used up her long-distance card to get over here. Now she was stuck. Even if she made it past the guards, her mother wouldn't allow her to use the royal family's teleportation array formation. However, just as she was about to give up helplessly, she remembered hearing about her young groom setting up teleportation hubs that connected the southern capital and Sky Blossom City. "Your Highness, you might be stronger than all of us combined now, but you're not stronger than the palace's array formations set up by your ancestors. Please don't struggle. Make it easy on us and on yourself," the royal guard captain pleaded, having watched her grow right before their eyes. They loved that she still retained her willful, whimsical side, but they hoped that this time she would take a step back for their sake. As they feared, even though Anna was strong, she wasn't strong enough to face the emissary of light. He would convert her into one of his followers before the fight even began. How is that even possible? Colleen cried in shock, causing Anna to panic and hurriedly check the live stream, only to find that her beloved had discovered a way to counter the emissary of light. He had used some ability to turn the brainwash guards back to normal. All the present Heatsen women were astonished and shell-shocked. Having seen Clown Mask's memories, she knew that the Western and Eastern forces had once been forced to execute those who had been forcibly brainwashed by the emissary of light into becoming his followers, as they had been unable to figure out how to undo his control. At first, they had tried imprisoning them in hopes of finding a cure later, but then the warden and the prison guards were converted into his followers as well, and together with the prisoners, they flanked their own positions. It had been a bloodbath. In the end, they had no choice but to steal their hearts and kill them when discovered. That's Wyatt for you, making the impossible happen while making it all seem so easy. Anna chimed, seeing that her beloved wasn't in trouble against an existence even her mother was wary of, as she watched the tug-of-war between her beloved and the emissary of light's soul projection. "Yes, that young man never fails to surprise us," Colleen said, before turning to her granddaughter and instructing her. "Now that you know Wyatt can hold his own against the emissary of light, go make preparations to enter the inheritance land and free your great-granddad." "Wait, what? Why would we do that? Wasn't she against you and Grandpa's marriage?" "Let that BTCH rot in the royal crypt," Anna said in panic, trying to stop them from freeing her great-grandaunt. At first, she had been all for it, but with the recent developments, she no longer wished to free her great-grandaunt until she was married to her beloved. As she feared, her great-grandaunt would try to keep the bloodline pure by forcing her into inbreeding with other unparalleled bloodline descendants, like JJ, for example. She was strong now, but she had also heard of her great-grandaunt's exploits. The latter was a battle maniac. She couldn't help but wonder how her grandaunt Lorne and grandpa had managed to seal her great-grandaunt in the royal crypt within their bloodline's inheritance land, forcing her to repent and reflect on her actions. As far as Anna knew, her great-grandaunt was not someone who would repent and reflect on her actions and be forgiving. Language, Anna. Colleen warned her granddaughter with a stern gaze. No matter what that woman had done or said to her, no one was allowed to badmouth her, especially not the Southern heir. She had once been hailed as the Southern hero, and her contributions to the royal family and the Southern region were undeniable. We need her now that the Masters plan to target us until we're forced to hand over Wyatt to them, Colleen revealed, then couldn't help but grudgingly add. Also, I want to show her just how dead wrong she was to reject me marrying your grandpa. Are you sure about that, Grandma? Because when she gets back, the first thing she'll do is throw Mother out of the royal palace. A betrothed princess has to live with her husband, not in the royal palace, even if divorced. Have you given this any thought? A lot of things around here will change. We can no longer live this free and will be forced to stay uptight and act stuck up in the name of elegance and proper etiquette, like those other royal and noble families. Anna tried her best to think of reasons why they shouldn't free her great-grandaunt yet. However, she was interrupted by her grandmother, who said, Anna, this is my palace, not hers. So, it's not for her to decide how it's run. Whatever you're worried about regarding her, don't be. Once she sees the path the current Southern region is on, she'll do everything in her power to bring about that future. Grandma, you are not getting my point, Anna cried aloud, then said desperately, what's stopping her from starting a coup like she did last time? Not immediately, but she definitely will. Next thing you know, she'll be forcing me to inbreed with my uncle or JJ and locking Wyatt away, forcing him to slave for the Southern region and the royal family for the rest of his life. But I fight her off and save Wyatt. Then we both escape to the way beyond and live happily ever after. What? Colleen looked at her granddaughter in puzzlement, trying to figure out how that little brain of hers worked. If anything, it wasn't Anna's turn to worry yet. If anybody should be worried, it was her son, who would have to worry about his grandma trying to inbreed with him. Honestly, Colleen didn't mind the idea. She felt it was far better than losing her son to the enlightened path. She would love their web babies no matter what, no less than she loved Anna, and Anne. After all, they were her grandbabies? Or was it her nephews and nieces? It doesn't matter as long as her son doesn't live a lonely life. That's the plot of that old, cringy folk song. No wonder it sounded so familiar. And sighed, realizing Anna did not even have the originality to come up with her own version of a tragic romance plot and had to plagiarize a forgotten folk song. Anna, stop making excuses and get to it ASAP. The Southern princess ordered her daughter, ignoring all her bizarre concerns. Though they were not unfounded, the times had changed, and so had the people. Also, Anna was living proof that one didn't need inbreeding to keep the bloodline pure. It was merely a scare tactic used by the ancestors to keep the bloodline within the family. No, I will not, Anna said resolutely, turning her focus to the live stream to watch her beloved's fight against the sole projection of the emissary of light. The Southern princess frowned, knowing it would be hard to convince Anna once she had made up her mind. What astounded her most was that the reason Anna was unwilling to free the former Southern hero was her fear that the latter would oppose her marriage to her beloved. Considering the former Southern hero's past actions, it was easy to see why Anna thought so. Even so, when the fate of the entire Southern region and the royal family hung in the balance, her marriage should not have been her primary concern, especially as the Southern heir. What the heck? Anna cried in shock, seeing the sole projection of the emissary of light break her beloved's celestial blood-ruled domain and continue to grow stronger. The Southern princess and Colleen watched the live stream grimly, understanding why they had lost to the three mischiefs in the clown mask's future vision. The strength displayed by the emissary of light had made it clear that they, the three mischiefs, too, were the pride of their generation and not to be underestimated. This was only a soul projection. They could not imagine what it would be like if the emissary of light were to appear in person. The myths of the celestial rule domain had driven the likes of the royal instructor and other powerful card apprentices into madness for centuries in their pursuit of it. Yet here, one had mastered it, while the other had found a way to counter it. The two of them were breaking reality as they knew it in turns. The only regret of the Southern Princess and Colleen was that, unfortunately, neither of them had been born into their family. Thankfully, their willful girl had chosen for herself the most capable of them as her husband. Why is Wyatt just standing there like a fool? Why doesn't he try to evade or something? And shouted in frustration, observing that the tug-of-war between them was over, as the soul projection of the emissary of light summoned an enormous amount of power out of nowhere and was now trying to squash their fiancé like an insect with one finger. Even though she had no time for anyone else in her life besides her mother, she had long accepted that whoever Anna ended up marrying was going to be her husband as well, because it wouldn't work otherwise. I'm sure he has something up his sleeve. If nothing else, he can fake his death like he did in the past, Anna said, having faith in her beloved, believing him to be cautious and far too slippery. He only fought if he had the slightest chance of winning. Otherwise, he would slip away, faking his death. If this had been back when she had taken charge of the Southern Watch, she would have felt nothing but disdain for someone like that. But now she admired him, now loved him to death. Colleen and the Southern Princess did not comment, as they knew Anna's groom could survive this. Since he had managed to survive the time separation array and nearly 4 dozen demigods equipped with time-related cards and runes, this level of threat should be nothing to him. They merely wanted to see how he would deal with it, to gauge his power and get a sense of just how strong he truly was. Because every time they thought they had him figured out, he would fail to surprise them. That's one way to deal with an incoming attack, I guess. But what's that red fog covering his growing body? And remarked, seeing that Anna's groom had finally reacted by unleashing his giant form. She had witnessed it before, but she had never seen the red fog oozing from it, protecting it by what looked like eating away at the soul projection of the emissary of light. What kind of transformation card is that? Is that the true form of the devil he is borrowing power from? And exclaimed in terror, seeing Anna's groom finally transform against the emissary of light's soul projection, whose radiating form was no longer visible within the huge shadow and was completely covered by the red fog. There must be more than 1,000 floating heads and pairs of arms behind his giant form, hidden within the fog. How is he even sustaining that form? It looks taller than a mountain. That's a lot of soul energy and rule power for a card master. Colleen cried in awe, wondering how the live stream could even capture his entire form within the grimoire's small video frame. She was surprised to learn that the Western princess possessed such skill in live streaming. The angles at which she filmed her grandson-in-law were nothing short of spectacular and breathtaking. What surprised her even more, however, was her grandson-in-law himself. He made her wonder if he was even human. If not for him having contracted a grimoire, she would have thought otherwise. There's no such devil that I've read of, the Southern Princess said, only for Anna to retort. Why do you all keep associating his power with the dark races? Why can't it be that he cultivated that power himself? Considering everything he has done and achieved so far, is it really that hard for you to believe that a card master can cultivate such power without following the card apprentice power system? Well, honey, that would make him even more suspicious, the Southern Princess remarked, only to see her lovely daughter's face scrunch up in worry. A subtle sadistic smile formed on her face, finding her daughter cute. She loved how Anna would suddenly become more thoughtful and intelligent when it came to her beloved. Anna was worried about understanding what it meant for her beloved to have come up with a whole new power system that could coexist with the card apprentice power system. She was just trying to defend her beloved against claims that he was borrowing power from devils and ended up thinking of far more worse than that. Now, she could only pray that what spouted in the heat of the moment was not the truth. Otherwise, things were only going to get worse. A whole new power system that can be cultivated along with the traditional power system. Now that could explain his abnormal power scaling. Colleen mulled over what her granddaughter said, trying to make sense of her grandson-in-law's prowess. It's not a whole new power system. It's just a card he created. You saw that his subordinates also have those cards. We even placed an order for our armies. Anna hurriedly denied, trying to make sure that the idea of a new power system didn't stick. She didn't want this to come and bite her beloved in the ass. Listening to her, the Southern Princess and Colleen couldn't help but stare at Anna, realizing that if there were ever a need, she would not hesitate to sell them out for her beloved. Just like them, the whole of the card world was shocked by the gargantuan form of the Southern Hope. The more than 1,000 floating heads and pairs of arms, shrouded in red fog, invoked a primal dread in their hearts and minds, making them question reality as they knew it. It was as if they were seeing an entire goddamn mountain come alive, like a deity with more than 1,000 heads and pairs of arms. Before the Southern Hope, the emissary of light looked like a fake deity. Even most of the fanatics thought he looked more like a deity than the emissary of light. In Sky Blossom City, on the rooftop of the TSR Guild, Susan, Jill, Corey Park, and Little Bame observed the huge silhouette with 1,000 heads and pairs of arms, shrouded in red fog. It wasn't just them. Everyone in Sky Blossom City had gathered on the streets or rooftops to witness the majestic figure of the Southern Hope. Even without watching the live stream, most had felt the presence looming above their city and had rushed out to learn what was going on from others. Meanwhile, the emissary of light was burning through faith faster than he was accumulating it, despite the hype surrounding the live stream. At this rate, he would barely be able to earn back the faith he had spent to break the celestial rule domain, achieve his form, and maintain it. Right now, he was stuck in a dilemma. Turns out the Southern Hope was more trouble than he bargained for. The emissary of light had two options before him. Either he retreated and stopped wasting any more faith, risking the sowing of doubt in the hearts and minds of his followers, or he went all out, at the risk of emptying his faith reserves fighting someone several decades younger than him. However, the boy's taunts were making it harder for the emissary of light to choose rationally. He believed that the boy was doing it on purpose, seeing how he was taunting him instead of trying to finish him off. Also, even though it was only his sole projection, the fact that he lost or secured a desperate win against a teenager would remain, planting seeds of doubt in his followers' hearts and decreasing their faith in him. Therefore, he could neither retreat nor continue to fight. He regretted choosing to intervene using his sole projection. He had seriously underestimated the Southern Hope. No, the whole world had seriously underestimated the Southern Hope. Knowing he was trapped in a no-win situation, the emissary of light came up with a way to handle it while saving face and preserving most of his faith reserves. No longer hesitating, he burned a large amount of faith and teleported both of them out of the public eye to a secluded location far, far from the Sky Blossom City. Master Wyatt, let us take our battle elsewhere, where no innocent lives will be caught in its wake. Shall we? At first, he had planned to teleport the Southern Hope somewhere far away and declare to the world that he had won, but then he changed his mind, knowing the Southern Hope would use that to defame him, calling him a humbug herald. He couldn't leave room for such a possibility. Therefore, he teleported both of them out of Sky Blossom City. This way, everyone would speculate about what had happened, but no one would know what actually occurred. The entire city was out on the streets or on the rooftops, searching for the demigods fighting above their city before they even had a chance to react in panic and run to safety. The deities vanished into thin air, finally allowing the early morning sun rays to reach the city. It all happened so fast that most of them wondered if it had been a dream. Only when they took to the Grimoire network did they understand what they had just witnessed and actually transpired. Bame, follow them. Corey instructed her pet from the terrace of the TSR Guild's building, observing her boss and the emissary of light's sole projection as they teleported out of the city, knowing that with Lil Bame's sense of smell and speed, it wouldn't be hard for it to track and catch up with them. Corey, stop! Susan and Jill called out simultaneously, watching her jump atop her giant pet snake's head. Landing on Lil Bame's head, she asked, "You guys also want to come too?" Jill, Lil Bame wouldn't allow an unfamiliar person to ride it. "No, we just received a text from Wyatt asking us not to worry. He will return soon and keep us updated," Jill said hurriedly, and Susan added, "Yes, he asked us not to waste time worrying about him and to keep the operation going and complete all the orders on time." Jill couldn't help but glance at Susan, realizing that the content of their texts from their beloved was completely different, even though he claimed that he didn't differentiate between them. At first, she grew jealous, thinking that Susan was deeply integrated into their beloved's organization, even leading it in his absence, while she herself was still on the outside. She couldn't accept it. Her ego wouldn't allow it. It was one thing to share her beloved with the other two temptresses, as she couldn't control him, but power and money were different. Though she wouldn't share and would keep all for herself, because unlike her beloved, they didn't possess a will and were meant to be controlled. However, looking at Susan, she suddenly felt something stir in her gut and immediately asked her, "Did you two fight or something?" "No, what would make you think that?" Susan hurriedly denied. Though a little surprised, she explained, not waiting for Jill's response. "I asked him to give me some space to think things through, so this is him giving me my space." "Things like what?" Jill asked in puzzlement, a little delight blooming in her heart. She couldn't help it. After all, the one in question was one of her love rivals. Jill had sought Susan out, hoping to assert the hierarchy between them, to show the chasm of difference when it came to strength, beauty, background, intelligence, and the like. But thanks to that meddling little girl with the monster snake pet, she failed and could only swallow her grievances. So, she didn't feel any guilt, even though Susan and she could now be considered more than acquaintances. Things like, Susan was about to answer Jill out of habit, but then realized the latter wouldn't understand. Jill and Anna had openly declared their relationships with their partners to the entire world, unlike her, who still couldn't make up her mind, worrying about the world's perception of their relationship. Shaking her head, Susan continued, "You wouldn't understand. Corey, don't dare try to slip away." "But he promised to help me acquire a soul trait last night," Corey complained as she lay flat on Lil Bame's head, dejected and disappointed. This wasn't the first time he hadn't kept an appointment with her. Then, turning onto her stomach and propping her chin on her palms, she looked at Jill and Susan and asked, "Why did he contact only you two? He should be contacting me first. Instead, he didn't even text me. Why would that be?" Jill asked quickly, on guard, wondering if her beloved had a fling with this little girl as well. She was starting to understand what her colleague meant when she said that dating handsome and popular men could be tiresome and mind-numbing. "Why? Because I'm his best friend. Think about it. Besides me, who is he close with non-romantically?" Corey proclaimed herself her boss's best friend, assigning a new meaning to the term. Listening to her answer, Jill's heart finally began beating regularly again. At the same time, she started to realize that the anxiousness and insecurity she was feeling wasn't just the result of dating a handsome and capable man. Maybe she wasn't as comfortable with her beloved dating other women while dating her as she claimed to be. This anxiety and fear surely weren't normal, at least not if she truly was fine with their arrangement. By that logic alone, there's Courtney, Bladette, Sarah, Jaya. Those names are just off the top of my head. Susan listed one after another, all of whom had a better chance of being considered her beloved's best friend than Corey. But noticing the latter's expression turn gravely dull, she hurriedly added, "You're more like Wyatt's bratty little sister. I mean, think about it. You're the only one who gets away with the kind of SHT you pull. He always finds a reason to forgive you or help you. Who wants to be his sis?" Corey was about to reject the idea of being her boss's little sister, but then a genius thought crossed her mind as she said, "Big sis Sue, if I'm his bratty little sister and also your little sister, then doesn't that make all three of us brothers and sisters?" "Sure, whatever works for you, honey," Susan agreed without thinking much of it. After all, Corey had been very vocal about opposing their relationship. "There is no point in arguing with you guys. You are smitten with him." Corey got off Lil Bame's head and headed to the basement of the building, while Lil Bame took to the sky, after informing, "I'll go check on Dre to see how she's adjusting to Bladette's dungeon seal." "Where the FCK am I?" I asked, looking at my surroundings, which resembled a mountain range. Because of my size, I felt as though I were standing in an ill-constructed maze of massive stones and snow. While the hive spirit tried to locate where the damned emissary of light had teleported us, I turned to find the city guard captain lying half-dead from exhaustion, no longer being supported by faith after the emissary of light cut off his soul projection. A pair of my floating arms hovered over the guard captain, using celestial empowerment to strengthen his overexerted will and awaken him. Simultaneously, I sent messages to my women and subordinates, informing them of my well-being, assuring them of my return soon, and asking them to continue their work as usual so that they wouldn't worry about me or let the world's perception of me affect their duty to me. Once my 1,000+ floating heads confirmed there was no threat nearby, I immediately returned to my regular form, not wanting to attract any more attention or trouble than I already had, until I was sure the emissary of light hadn't teleported me to the son of a bitch. I cursed aloud in my mind, as the hive spirit, with the help of the Devil Merchant Code's inter-realm transportation functions location feature and the data it had collected on the card world's geography, confirmed my suspicions. It determined that the emissary of light had indeed sent me to a never-before-explored, uncharted part of the way beyond, approximately 67,000 miles from the southern region. The emissary of light's endgame to escape my checkmate caught me by surprise. To be honest, I had underestimated the capability of faith. Only now that I had experienced it, I knew that with enough faith he could simply teleport us out of the southern region, despite my resisting it with all my will and celestial force. Yes, my celestial force was strong, but compared to the emissary of light's faith reserve, it fell short by a wide margin. I knew that. I thought it wouldn't matter, but it did. This came as a tremendous shock to me, as I was a hybrid celestial. Teleporting me against my will was akin to teleporting a very small celestial. Even dark races, who could destroy celestials for their celestial will fragments, couldn't achieve that. This included the likes of the Devil Merchant Code, which could teleport demons/devil merchants anywhere within the known myriad realms and even explore the unknown myriad realms for a premium. Now I was beginning to understand how the dark cults had managed to survive while opposing the Devil Merchant Code. I should have known that dark cults capable of making the Devil Merchant Code go out of its way to preach against them were not to be underestimated. Faith was mighty enough to threaten even the Devil Merchant Code, one of the entities in the known myriad realms closest to achieving transcendence. This was enough to prove that the dark cult's mastery and knowledge of faith was by far superior to that of the emissary of light, who was foolishly limiting himself by trying to become the true son of the card celestial, as he hadn't been exposed to the world outside of the card world. If he did, his ultimate goal would never be to become a celestial affiliated with the card celestial. Just thinking about how I had been blindsided by someone like that pissed me off so much that I couldn't even take solace in the fact that he might have used up a huge chunk of his faith reserves to teleport me so far away against my will. The reason I was caught unprepared was that, as a rookie demon merchant, I had yet to be exposed to the faith practiced by dark cults, which didn't get enough credit in the Devil Merchant Code. Had I known faith was going to be so troublesome, I would have approached this whole differently. How could I, when my plan had been to expose him to the 5 regions as a false herald? Now, I was left wondering what I had managed to achieve from all this, and how the 5 regions would react to my true form. It all felt moot, except for the celestial empowerment, which made my anger recede a little. Master Wyatt, thank you for saving my squad and me, the guard captain said as he awakened, immediately expressing his gratitude without attending to his weak and exhausted body. Don't mention it. Get healed. Taking out a few high-grade blood elixirs, I handed them to him and said, "We are in an unexplored part of the way beyond. Uncharted way beyond." The guard captain exclaimed in utter horror as he finally began to scrutinize his surroundings in terror. Every little sound suddenly seemed to spook him. He was an elite card demigod who had survived countless battles and wars, yet out here he behaved like a child trying to cross a dark alley late at night. After all, these were parts of the way beyond that even the bravest card apprentices would not dare enter without extensive preparation and a proper team, let alone waking up here with no preparation or knowledge at all. Stop spacing out and drink the potions before you fall unconscious from exhaustion again, I reminded the guard captain, who seemed to have forgotten all his survival training and experience as he grew aware of our eerie surroundings. To me, the sight was mesmerizing, but as the saying goes, beauty is in the beholder's eyes. Yes, sorry. The guard captain nodded vigorously before chugging down the elixirs, his rigid posture gradually easing as he began to accept our circumstances. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to exploring my options for returning to my city from this goddamned place. However, with baggage in tow, most of the obvious methods I would normally rely on were no longer viable. I glanced at the guard captain, who was focused on his recovery, before beginning to scout for a suitable place to set up Daly's teleportation array and connect it to her teleportation array network. At first, I considered that since I was already here in the uncharted way beyond, I might as well explore it, turning my return trip into an adventure filled with exploration and foraging. I had only heard of how dangerously beautiful the way beyond was, with its bountiful resources, but now that I am here, I might as well check it out for myself. However, if even part of what I had heard about the way beyond were true, then I couldn't turn my return trip to the 5 regions into an adventure because the guard captain, though an elite demigod, was not capable of tagging along with me on such a journey. Therefore, I decided to set up a teleportation array in a secluded place nearby, use it to return home with the guard captain, and come back for the adventure I had planned when I had more time on my hands. After all, I had 3 urgent commitments that I had to attend to no matter what. One with Morningstar University, another with my Calamity Daughter Corps, Kuthdia, and the last with Moon Frost and her tribe in the Dark Realm. These commitments would vastly affect my future plans, so I couldn't afford to neglect them. Having made up my mind, I headed up the nearby mountain, as earlier one of the floating heads had found an empty cave there. With proper arrangements, the cave could be transformed and used as a long-standing teleportation hub. It would also serve as a good resource point when the freedom fighters explore this part of the way beyond. Apart from those working on the teleportation hubs, most of the freedom fighters were sitting on their asses. I planned to have them explore the surroundings and forage for resources. I wasn't worried that their strength would be insufficient to explore this land, because while surveying my surroundings, the 1,000-plus floating heads had found that apart from a few peculiar flora forming the limited vegetation at the foot of these mountains, there were no other living creatures in these mountain ranges. It was totally deserted. Besides, the freedom fighters had experience exploring and inhabiting unknown realms. The uncharted way beyond shouldn't be that hard for them, especially with a teleportation hub nearby for escape in case of emergency. As I flew uphill, leaving a limitless barrier around the guard captain, allowing him to focus on his recovery without any worries, I found the quietness very peaceful. Except for the 2 of us, there was no other being in these mountain ranges. Yes, I found the situation weird for 2 reasons. First, this place was nothing like the monster and supreme being crawling way beyond I had heard of. Second, why would the emissary of light bother to throw me into a safe zone despite losing a substantial amount of faith over it? Things didn't add up. The emissary of light I knew wasn't the type to forgive someone. There had to be a reason he teleported us here, out of all the places in the way beyond. Therefore, I was very cautious. I made use of my primordial soul pupils to explore ahead before heading into the cave. My giant floating heads had already checked the surroundings thoroughly with their soul pupils and found no threats. But since this involved the emissary of light, I had to be extra cautious. After making sure there were no surprises hidden in the cave, I entered it. Heading deeper inside, I found a space large enough to host a large-scale platform capable of supporting multiple teleportation arrays. Just as I was about to begin setting up the array formations, I sensed that the guard captain had awakened, completing his recovery. I remotely retrieved the limitless barrier protecting him while signaling where he could find me. Then, I summoned my primordial spirit clones and got busy laying the foundation, reinforcing the cave structure, and setting up several protective array formations before moving on to erecting the teleportation array formations. Working as a team, with our combined efforts, it didn't take long to turn the cave into the infrastructure for a teleportation hub. Meanwhile, the guard captain stood guard at the cave entrance, careful not to get in the way of whatever it was I was doing. He didn't pester me with his fears. He quietly stood guard, letting me do what I wanted without question. It was a vast difference compared to his reaction when he learned that we were in the uncharted part of the way beyond. Now, he felt like a veteran card demigod who had served in the Southern Watch, distinguished and outstanding enough to be trusted by the royal to guard my city. Just as my clones and I began setting up the teleportation array on the platform we had just designed, we sensed a change in the surrounding soul pathways. The oxygen and soul power content in the cave's atmosphere was rapidly being replaced by what looked like an energized, yet stable form of methane. Noticing this rapid change, without hesitation, I retrieved my clones and rushed out of the cave toward the guard captain, only to find him passed out, with the entire valley and the peaks of the mountain range devoid of oxygen and soul energy, drowning in a fog of an energized yet stable form of methane. Due to the heaviness of this energized methane, even the blowing wind had come to a halt. The entire mountain range had turned into one massive disaster. I was finally beginning to understand why these mountain ranges were devoid of living creatures. I immediately covered both myself and the unconscious guard captain in a limitless barrier before checking on him. As I inspected him with my soul pupils, I found that his entire soul pathways were clogged with this energized yet stable form of methane, rendering him unconscious. Had I arrived a few hours later, he would have died from poisoning and suffocation, though I couldn't guarantee which would have claimed his life first. Just as I was grasping for a way to save the guard captain, a deep, unnatural rumble tore through the valley. A massive boulder broke free, rolling down the mountainside like a harbinger of the end. My blood ran cold as I watched it create a snowball effect, causing multiple stones to roll down, colliding and crashing into one another. Seeing the sparks fly, I cursed aloud, FCK. Boom! In an instant, the entire mountain range, from its highest peak to its lowest foothills, detonated. As the boulder and stones rolled down the mountain and struck other rocks, they generated sparks. With enough sparks, even the energized yet stable form of methane in the area ignited and detonated, which in turn triggered the methane in its vicinity, forming a cascading chain reaction. It was like witnessing nature's version of a thermobaric missile at work. In under a couple of minutes, the entire mountain range was reduced to a sandy desert. Thanks to my limitless barrier, I was able to witness all of this with my primordial soul pupils without any interruption from the explosion itself. I even saw the snow on the mountains vaporize into scorching steam during the blast. Under the all-round pressure of the explosion, the vapor condensed and accumulated, forming pockets of superheated steam within the blast zone. When the methane detonation subsided, these pockets of superheated steam burst thunderously as the pressure that sustained them vanished with the explosion. This gave rise to another round of explosions. However, this second wave was deadlier and more destructive than the first, reducing whatever remained of the mountains after the initial blast into fine sand. It also created violent drafts capable of burning anything they came into contact with to ash. One had to understand that this energized, yet stable form of methane was the result of soul energy. I had never seen such a form of methane in Earth's natural environments or laboratories. That was to say, the destructive power of this methane fog was more than sufficient to completely level and pulverize the mountain range. If that didn't get the job done, the pockets of concentrated, superheated steam did. Knowing this, I didn't dare retrieve my limitless barrier. I left it in place and tended to the guard captain instead. I made use of my soul energy manipulation to create extremely thin energy needles and pierced his soul pathways, drawing the methane out of his body and flushing it with clear, refined soul energy. Methane was colorless, tasteless, and odorless. The poor guy never saw it coming. His intense sense should have, but the methane fog had spread too quickly, covering the entire mountain range in mere seconds. Just as I was expelling the methane from the guard captain's body and circulating pure soul energy through him, the surrounding dunes of sand began to sink, forming a vast, swirling pattern around a pitch-black void beneath them that acted as the eye of the phenomenon. The suction force it generated was overwhelming. Within minutes, the entire desert was swallowed. Fixed in the air and surrounded by infinitely stretched space, I escaped the suction force and witnessed everything in horror. When I looked down at the origin of the pitch-black void, I saw the walls of ground closing in on itself like an anal hole before water began to spurt out from the cracks, rapidly filling the crater and forming a large lake. When I made use of my primordial soul pupils, I detected a massive concentration of pure stone rule power moving beneath the ground, deep underground, diving further into the card world's crust until it moved out of my vision. Its pace was far too fast for me to interfere in any way. All I could tell was that it was humongous, and that its body was similar to Bladette's, formed entirely from condensed rule power. I immediately suspected it was the Stone Supreme, but without definitive proof, I couldn't confirm anything. Compared to the Blood Supreme, who had chosen the form of a human, the Stone Supreme seemed to have taken the shape of a humongous underground behemoth or even a leviathan. I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for something like that to decimate a city. Judging by how quickly it had reduced an entire mountain range to sand and swallowed it whole, the answer was clear. Far less time than anyone could afford. I also couldn't help but wonder whether the Stone Supreme had warned the living creatures inhabiting the mountain range before deciding to feed on it, giving them time to migrate. Otherwise, I couldn't think of a better reason why the entire mountain range was devoid of life, except for a few flora born from stone rule. If this were true, was the Stone Supreme showing care and mercy toward these living creatures, or was it merely ensuring that its palate remained restricted to the diet it preferred, stones? From what I had observed during my time with Bladette, I had realized that supreme beings, like humans, were social. However, unlike humans, they were simple-minded but not to the point of being called stupid, emotionally honest, and fearless. That was to say, supreme beings thought simply, not shallowly. They ignored politics, strategy, and social norms unless those things clashed with their values and interests. When it mattered, their instincts were razor-sharp. If I had to guess, the Stone Supreme had warned the living creatures for both reasons. I even believe that the living creatures had helped the Stone Supreme by clearing away vegetation that didn't suit its appetite, which explained why we had only seen stone rule plants and nothing else. Not that it mattered, as everything would have been reduced to ash or sand. Perhaps those living creatures had performed it as a sign of respect or outright worship. Of course, that was all based on the assumption that the Stone Supreme had warned the living creatures to leave the mountain range. It was also possible that the mountain range had been devoid of life from the very beginning. Honestly, I didn't have all the facts, and now that the mountain range was gone, I never will. But the Emissary of Light did. Otherwise, how would he have known that the Stone Supreme was about to feast on this mountain range? Or perhaps it had merely been a coincidence, considering that he recalled his soul projection without killing the guard captain. Given his nature, and knowing that I could undo his brainwashing, he should have killed the guard captain, yet he didn't. Maybe he hadn't known where we would be teleported at all and had sent us away randomly, simply to expend as little faith as possible. Be that as it may, I was beginning to realize that returning to the 5 regions with baggage weighing me down was not going to be easy. Just as I was focused on circulating soul energy through the guard captain's body, I caught, from the corner of my eye, a column of water shooting up from the vast lake beneath me. By the time the sound reached my ears, I sensed an entity forcing its way into my limitless barrier, attempting to cross its infinitely stretched space to reach me. Moments later, my limitless barrier ruptured like a bubble, tearing the stretched space apart. The unconscious guard captain and I were nearly pulled into the resulting spatial void. I hurriedly secured him and prepared to escape the range of the suction force, but a pair of hands suddenly seized us and dragged us out of there. "Card apprentice, is your friend okay?" an ethereal voice asked. I turned toward the source of the voice and saw the one responsible for this upheaval. It appeared humanoid, with natural famine attributes. She had petrified gray skin, hair, and eyes, and looked less like a living being and more like a living statue, or a gargoyle. Even so, she was undeniably striking. The craftsmanship was on an entirely different level. "Stone Supreme?" I blurted out in astonishment as I watched the void closing as the space behind her rapidly knit itself back together. I now understood why my limitless barrier had ruptured so suddenly. It was because her overall mass exceeded what the density of my limitlessly stretched space could withstand. Despite her size, she was unimaginably heavy, like the world itself. Her mere presence within my stretched space had pierced a tear through it. And since the space itself was stretching limitlessly, that tear continued to expand until, with a pop, the entire barrier shattered into fragments. "My human name is Petra Petros. I will allow you to call me Petra." The Stone Supreme introduced herself as if this wasn't the first time meeting humans. "Hi, Petra. I'm Dalton Wyatt. My friend is fine," I replied, checking on the guard captain as I induced him into a deeper sleep and sealed him inside a miniature limitless prison bubble, storing it in my dimensional storage card beside Slay's egg, next to Jill's uncle. I wanted to avoid doing this, but I was forced to anyway to ensure I was prepared for any possible scenario. Hopefully, for the guard captain's sake, he doesn't wake up earlier than my calculation. Petra's brows furrowed as she watched me store the guard captain away. Then she said, "You are strong enough to have survived my demolition. I will give you that. But you heeded your greed instead of my warning. Now suffer the consequences of your insolence." Wait, I uttered, not wanting to fight a supreme being in the way beyond, which was crawling with them. However, without even listening to my explanation, Petra attacked me with a strange stone rule. It bypassed all my defenses. Under its effect, all the minerals in my body began to attract one another and coagulate into stone. It reminded me of kidney stones, only this experience was 1,000 times worse. The pain was unbearable. It felt as if I were being petrified from the inside out. In the next instant, her stone rule flooded my body, and those small stones rapidly expanded into massive thorns that pierced outward all at once, causing my body to burst into a shower of blood, leaving a huge thorny stone. My primordial calamity soul gem remained intact, embedded within the mass of thorny stone as it fell toward the lake. I intended to feign death and slip away once Petra left. However, the free-falling stone mass abruptly came to a halt midair. Petra intervened, manipulating it until the stone disintegrated and exposed my soul gem. With no other choice, I reconstructed a new body and attempted to reason with her once more. "Petra, is that a mutated ego gem?" Petra cut me off and asked with an authoritative tone. "You know about mutated ego gems?" I asked, feigning exaggerated shock to tickle Petra's pride, hoping to buy a few more seconds before she destroys the second body. From the fact that she had come to meet us in her humanoid form, I gathered that she had experience dealing with card apprentices. And from what she had said earlier, I inferred that she had indeed warned the living creatures occupying the mountain range to leave, among whom card apprentices appeared to have been present as well. Now that she could identify my soul gem as a mutated ego gem, it was clear that she had a solid grasp of card apprentice knowledge. Also, proving that my earlier assumption that this was an unexplored part of the way beyond was clearly wrong. Between Petra's words and the emissary of light teleporting us here, I was beginning to understand that it might have been the Empire's card apprentices that Petra had encountered before. It seemed the Empire was also active in the way beyond. At least in this part of the way beyond, they were more active than in the 5 regions. I couldn't help but wonder how their expedition had managed to stretch so far into the way beyond. "Yes, it was a mutated gem," I answered Petra. She frowned and immediately asked, "How come I couldn't crush it, no matter how hard I tried?" I stared at Petra with a deadpan expression, screaming internally, "Why don't you just ask me how to crush my ego gem?" Of course, I didn't voice those thoughts. Instead of answering her question, I redirected the conversation. "Where in the way beyond is this? My friend and I were teleported here by our enemy. Fortunately, I was strong enough to withstand your demolition. Otherwise, we would have had no way of getting back home." Petra stared at me in silence, listening carefully, before saying, "Don't you dare lie to me. You will turn into stone. Even your mutated ego gem will not be able to save you this time." Listening to Petra, I hurriedly checked my body. Seeing that I hadn't turned to stone, I said, "I didn't turn into stone. That proves I didn't lie to you and that I'm telling the truth." I don't know," Petra said, squinting as she stared at me intensely. Then she admitted, "I'm unable to use my Petruth rune 1 on you. I wonder if it's because of your mutated ego gem." She continued to stare at me hard before remarking, "You aren't lying to me, right?" "I'm not lying to you," I replied awkwardly, only for Petra to stare even harder before letting out a long sigh and complaining, "This isn't fair. Why can't I use my Petruth rune on you? Now how am I supposed to decide whether I should kill you or not? Would it help if I said I was friends with another supreme being?" I asked, thinking that Petra was just as innocent as Bloodette, except that the former possessed the ability to determine whether someone was lying or telling the truth. That combined with her prowess, no card apprentice would dare to cross her. "Who?" Petra asked eagerly. "None I know would befriend a card apprentice." "The Blood Supreme, Bloodette," I revealed grandly, only to find Petra's gossipy expression instantly petrified into indifference. then hardened into a grim one as she replied, "You're friends with the Blood Supreme. That's great, but where did you last see her, and when?" "Why do you ask like that?" I countered instead of answering, having sensed killing intent in Petra's eyes, along with a trace of disgust, whenever I mentioned Bladette. "Asked like how? I don't understand," Petra replied stubbornly, deliberately feigning ignorance as she forced a smile onto her face. "Bladette," I said again. Noticing the flicker of disgust that crossed Petra's face at the sound of the name, I immediately pointed it out. "There, that look on your face. What was that?" "Where? What look?" "This is how I normally look," Petra insisted, continuing to pretend. So I casually looked past her and waved my hand. "Hi, Bladette. Did you come to rescue me?" "Bladette, you itch." Petra suddenly screamed. She spun around, frantically searching for Bladette, and swore, "Today, I will kill you for sure." Unable to find even a trace of Bladette, Petra quickly turned back to me and demanded, "Where is she? Where did she go?" I slowly shook my head and, meeting her gaze, pressed, "Are you still planning to deny that something's wrong?" "You tricked me," Petra said, staring at me in shock as she retreated several steps, as if I were the plague. It was clear she had realized that without her Petruth rune, she was extremely vulnerable to deception. Seeing Petra stare at me like a spooked gargoyle backed into a corner, I knew she was weighing whether to kill me or keep me alive to extract Bladette's location. Knowing that her Petruth rune didn't work on me, she had abruptly shifted from a social butterfly into something far more socially awkward and withdrawn. I would be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying the look on her face. Still, I had to act before she reached a hasty decision out of desperation. "Petra, why do you hate Bladette?" Petra continued to stare at me in silence, offering no answer. So I pressed further. "I swear, if you tell me why you hate Bladette, I'll tell you where to find her." "You swear?" Petra asked cautiously. Seeing me nod with a gentle smile, she finally said, "She killed me and my friends for the sake of a card apprentice. We planned to hunt her and that card apprentice down, but for some reason we couldn't sense her. So, I believed she was dead and chose not to descend. Until you mentioned her name. Now I assume she was hiding in your small settlement all this time with that card apprentice. Just think about it make me angry. No, she isn't with that human. She's imprisoned by them in a dungeon seal, unable to break free or even die. She has no recollection of her past and is completely alone. Trust me, she's in more misery than any of you could possibly put her through," I said, despite having no idea which card apprentice Petra was referring to. I wonder if it was the one Bladette saw in her vision while helping Sarah. Besides, I shared this information because I hoped it would either temper her anger or push her toward pity or even cruel amusement at Bladette's suffering. "How dare you card apprentices seal and harm a supreme being? This is outrageous," Petra cried aloud, as if she hadn't been shouting about killing Bladette moments earlier. I was thoroughly confused, unable to make sense of what was going on in that stone head of hers. Then she suddenly looked at me and asked, "You're not lying to me, right?" "No, I wouldn't lie about something like this. As I said earlier, she's a friend of mine, and I'm helping her break out of the dungeon she's sealed in. I'm one of the good ones. If you want, I can bring over a clone of her as proof. Maybe seeing you will jog her memories," I assured her with the most charming smile I could manage. "No need to bring her clone. Take me to the dungeon seal. I'll break it open and free her, and once she has recalled her memories and grown used to her freedom, I'll kill her. That will teach her not to kill me and my friends," Petra declared, laying bare her intentions for Bladette. "No, you can't go to the 5 regions. If you do, you'd be breaking the treaty between supreme beings and card apprentices," I said, making it a priority to avoid a scenario where Petra would rampage through Sky Blossom City in an attempt to free Bladette. Petros plus truth equals Petruth. Petros in Greek is stone/rock. "What treaty?" "The one you card apprentices break every damn day," Petra asked with open disdain, clearly no fan of the treat that only ever seemed to serve the other side. "I doubt they'll mind if I break it just once." "Hey, Petra," I said, frowning. "How do you know that Bladette killed you and your friends for a card apprentice if you died and were reborn afterward?" Petra looked even more confused than before. "What do you mean? Won't you remember someone who killed you and your friends?" "I mean this," I continued, clarifying my thoughts. If you were reborn anew, shouldn't your memories have started from scratch? You should have forgotten everything from before. At least, that's what I've heard. I was beginning to suspect that Petra might actually be dumber than Bladette, who possessed none of her past memories at all. The only reason Petra hadn't been exploited and discarded by some card apprentice, the way Bladette had, was because of her Petruth rune. If possible, I should forge a similar rune for my Calamity Daughter cores. That would help them function more independently. Oh, that, Petra said. There are several ways to retain one's memories after dying and being reborn. The most common relies on understanding and comparing the rules and their meanings. Through that process, our memories return in fragments. Slowly but inevitably, once we reach the limit of the card world, we recover everything from all our previous deaths. She went on, her explanation precise and deliberate. There is another method as well. Using certain rules and meanings, you can extract and preserve your memories, then have a trusted companion return them to you after your rebirth. Both methods come with drawbacks, but traditionally we favor the former. With the latter, you must constantly update the stored memories you've entrusted to someone else, all while hoping they don't die before you or alongside you. That kind of maintenance is troublesome, so I chose the first approach. Her expression darkened. That's why it was such a shock when I learned that Bladette was the one who killed me. She was my friend. Petra paused, steadying herself. It didn't truly matter in the end. Within the confines of the card world, we cannot be permanently killed. Even so, the betrayal still hurt. Her gaze sharpened. And for that, I will have my revenge. She fell silent after that, her focus clearly slipping as thoughts of Bladette's betrayal resurfaced. So you and Bladette were friends? I asked with my genuine surprise evident in my voice. Haven't you been listening? Petra snapped. Didn't I just explain that? As a matter of fact, we were best friends. I was the one who taught her how to create rocks using blood rule power. It was incredibly simple, yet she never thought of it until I pointed it out to her. I responded with an awkward smile, quietly relieved that she no longer seemed to be weighing whether to kill me. At the same time, the revelation that Petra had been the one who taught Bladette how to form blood rule rocks and stones caught me off guard. And now Bladette was sealed within a dungeon themed around that very concept. The irony was unsettling. The more I thought about it, the more surreal it became, and my curiosity about Bladette's past only deepened. If you really were friends, I said, choosing my words with care, don't you think Bladette might have had her own reasons or circumstances for what she did? Maybe she believed you would understand once you heard her side of the story. She might have thought you would at least listen, even if you didn't forgive her. I paused when Petra's expression hardened with irritation, but I pressed on. I'm not asking you to forgive her, and I'm not telling you to abandon your desire for getting even with her. All I'm suggesting is this. Hear her out, for the sake of what you once shared. If that friendship ever meant anything to you, listen first, then decide what to do with her afterward. Hear her out, Petra asked, narrowing her eyes at me in suspicion. Didn't you say she lost her memories? Didn't you say you'd kill her after she regains her memories and grows accustomed to her new freedom? I countered, deliberately reminding her of her own words, hoping she would grasp what I was implying. It was a long shot, but to my surprise, she didn't disappoint me. Realization flickered across her face. Oh, she said slowly. But first, we'll have to free her. Take me to where she's being sealed right now. I'm sorry. I can't, I replied. If I take you there, you'll only make things worse and won't be of any help to Bladette. The dungeon seal is directly connected to her. It's unbreakable, just like you supreme beings, until the required conditions are fulfilled. Petra cried out immediately, her voice sharp with accusation. You swore. I swore to tell you where Bladette was sealed, I said calmly, jogging her memory before she could brand me a cheat and return to debating whether to kill me. I never swore that I would take you there. Then, honoring my promise, I added, Bladette is sealed in the Blood Rock Gate dungeon of Sky Blossom City, in the southern region. You have to take me there, Petra insisted. I need to see the dungeon seal for myself and decide what must be done. In her urgency, she seemed to forget everything else. Her eagerness to reach Bladette was unmistakable. She wanted to see her, to check on her condition, and to find a way to help her escape the dungeon seal. It was clear that, despite the fire she breathed whenever Bladette's name was mentioned, concern still lay at the core of her anger. Perhaps she hadn't been exaggerating after all when she said they were best friends. But that makes things difficult for me. Had I known that Petra and Bladette were this close, I would have reconsidered my approach. At the very least, I wouldn't have made Bladette's circumstances sound so miserable to Petra. Now, I had no idea how to get her off my back about taking her to meet Bladette. What are you thinking? Petra snapped. Stop wasting time and take me to her already. Her impatience snapped me out of my thoughts, only reinforcing the realization that I had played this entirely wrong. But how was I supposed to know she would care so deeply about someone whose very name made her radiate such thick, killing intent? Shaking my head, I said, "Fine, I will take you there. But you will have to take an oath in the presence of the world's will, that you will listen and follow my arrangement." Knowing I couldn't get rid of Petra, I decided to recruit her instead. Her Petruth rune would come in handy. Perhaps she could even help me create cards modeled after her Petruth rune. Having a powerful supreme being at my beck and call wouldn't hurt if she agreed to take the oath in the presence of the card world's will. You do know that oaths don't actually work on us, right? We can break them any time we want, Petra said, looking at me with a sneer. Hearing that, I realized something crucial. Supreme beings had their own rule stream spirits backing them. No oath could truly bind them. They could always rely on their connections to escape the consequences. In other words, trying to use oaths taken in the presence of the world's will to trick the Supreme Being wasn't possible unless they chose to honor it themselves. My thoughts immediately drifted to the idea of using a demon merchant contract, but I quickly suppressed it. That would be crossing a line. After all, the card Celestial had been remarkably accommodating toward my existence, even offering its assistance on several occasions. There was a chance it might extend the same consideration to me in Petra's case as well. If that were the case, then an oath taken in the presence of the world's will could still hold weight, so long as I neither harmed nor coerced Petra into doing anything shady. It wasn't as though I planned to do that anyway, so I decided to give it a try. It's fine. I trust you, I said, doing my best to sound casual. If you take an oath in the presence of the world's will, I can take you to where Bladette is. Petra immediately sneered. So you think I am lying to you, huh? Don't come crying to me when it doesn't work. Either way, you'll still have to take me to Bladette, no matter what. Yes, I nodded, quickly urging Petra to proceed before she could change her mind. She took the oath as follows. I, Petra Petros, the Stone Supreme, swear in the presence of the world's will to follow Dalton Wyatt's arrangements and commands, in exchange for him taking me to where Bladette is sealed. After swearing the oath, Petra then ordered me, now, take me to where Bladette is. First, morph into a complete human, or change your form into a ring or bracelet. That way, I can take you into the 5 regions without drawing any attention. You decide, I instructed Petra, intending to test whether my hunch was correct. I never got the chance as Petra was unexpectedly obedient. In the blink of an eye, she morphed into a human woman clad in full-body crystal armor. Her facial features and physique remained the same as before, except now they were formed of flesh rather than condensed stone rule power. Good. Now find a secluded location where no one can disturb us, but one that's suitable for setting up a teleportation array formation. That way, you'll be able to travel back and forth, I instructed Petra. Since this was her domain, she would know the terrain far better than I ever could. She was the best person to choose a location for a teleportation hub that wouldn't be discovered by monsters or the Empire's card apprentices. A teleportation array formation? In that case, this place should suit your needs, Petra said. Without any warning, she grabbed me by the waist and plunged straight into the ground. I didn't resist. Taking advantage of her confidence that the oath wouldn't truly bind her, I had deliberately kept its wording as vague as possible. That ambiguity granted me considerable leeway, enough to compel Petra to act according to my arrangements when necessary. Even so, I still didn't know whether the card Celestial would uphold her oath on my behalf, out of consideration for me. Based on my past interactions with it, however, I had a strong feeling that it would. After all, I wasn't harming Petra or restraining her against her will. I didn't know what rule meaning Petra was using, but it allowed her to carry me through the crust of the card world as though we were diving into an ocean. Before long, we emerged into a vast subterranean world. Seeing my momentary awe, Petra asked smugly, "Welcome to my home." What do you think? Under different circumstances, I might have applauded with tears in my eyes. Unfortunately, countless journeys through dungeons and other realms had long since dulled my sensitivity to such spectacles. Take my and Dreedra's creation, the Seed World, for example. It was several times more mesmerizing than Petra's subterranean realm. Regardless, it was a good location to build a teleportation hub, but it lay several miles below ground level. I doubted Petra would be willing to personally assist my subordinates with commuting between the hub and the surface. Although it wasn't an ideal site for my way beyond exploration plans, I decided it would suffice as a temporary solution. "We are here," I said to Petra as we emerged within the teleportation hub of Sky Blossom City. The moment my words settled, I realized we were not alone. Anna stood at the forefront, flanked by Susan, Jill, Corey, Courtney, Cindy, and the others, all waiting in disciplined silence. Beyond them, the plaza had transformed into a living formation. The fine gold guards were arrayed in immaculate ranks, armor catching the light like sheets of molten sun. The Bright Lion gang stood nearby, their presence less formal but no less imposing, eyes sharp and posture resolute. Behind them gathered the rehabilitated criminals' army, the Sin Army, assembled with an almost solemn gravity, as if determined to prove that their past no longer defined their blades. Encircling the hub, the regular employees along with citizens who filled every balcony, street, and skyway overlooking the platform. Their voices had fallen into a reverent hush, replaced by a solemn weight in the air, as though the city itself had drawn a breath. All eyes were fixed upon the teleportation array, upon us. This wasn't just a grand reception, but the acceptance of my true form. My gaze drifted to Cindy. She stood composed among the others, calm but with a mischievous glint in her eyes as ever. There was no mistaking her role in this. She controlled the teleportation array network. Without her warning, without her coordination, such a gathering would have been impossible. The sheer scale of it sent a quiet tremor through me. Beside me, Petra's eyes widened, her posture tightening as suspicion flickered across her expression. For a brief moment, she seemed to wonder whether this was an ambush of my making, an elaborate trap meant to close around her the instant she stepped forward. I paid it no mind and moved ahead, intending to address the gathered forces. I never got the chance. Before a single word could leave my mouth, the crowd spoke as one. Their voices rolled across the teleportation hub like a controlled thunderclap, unified, disciplined, and heavy with reverence. "All hail the Southern Hope, bearer of hope, anchor of the South. By your will, we stand." The proclamation reverberated through stone and steel, through armor and bone, carried not merely by lungs, but by conviction. The very air seemed to vibrate with it. The fine gold guards moved first. Clad in radiant armor, they shifted with flawless precision, as though rehearsed 1,000 times. Every guard struck fist to chest in perfect unison, the impact ringing out like a ceremonial bell. "By oath and gold, we endure. Command us, Southern Hope. Our blades are ready. Our lives are yours." Their formation did not waver for even a heartbeat, yet the strain was visible. It was as if sheer discipline alone held them upright, resisting an instinct deeper than training, the urge to kneel before something they recognized as greater. The Bright Lion gang followed, less rigid but no less fierce. Led by Aurelia Malvin, they stepped forward as one, heads lowered in respect rather than submission. Their voices rose louder than the rest, burning with pride and battle-hardened loyalty. "The lion bows only to hope. Where you walk, we follow. Let the South roar." This was not worship. It was allegiance, earned through blood and battle. Then came the most striking sight of all, the Sin Army. The rehabilitated criminals' army, led by demigod Redfall and Een Widow, lowered their grimoires and went to one knee in unison. The motion was heavy, deliberate, and absolute. Not born of fear, but of resolve. Their voices were rough and imperfect, shaped by hard lives and harder choices, yet utterly sincere. "Witness us. We were broken. By the Southern Hope, we stand redeemed." For them, this was not a greeting. It was a vow, spoken aloud and renewed before the entire city. Then my three queens, Anna, Susan, and Jill, ascended the teleportation platform and came to my side. Their steps were elegant and unhurried, each movement carrying a quiet authority that drew every gaze in the hub toward them. They did not need to announce themselves. Their presence alone was enough. As they took their places beside me, anticipation tightened in my chest. Anna and Jill had already acknowledged me openly, their choices made without hesitation. Susan, however, had yet to do so. Before the eyes of the entire city, I found myself waiting, wondering whether she would accept me here and now, with no veil of privacy to soften the moment. I never received my answer. The fragile stillness shattered as Petra suddenly broke formation, rushing past us toward Courtney's side. Her composure fractured completely as she shouted with a sharp alarm and disbelief, "Bloodette!" The girls turned toward me at once, suspicion plain in their expressions. I raised both hands slightly and shook my head, projecting innocence as I explained. "That's the Stone Supreme, Petra Petros. We met at the Way Beyond. Apparently, she and Bloodette are best friends, so I brought her along." "Oh." Anna and Jill exchanged a glance, then nodded in understanding. A heartbeat later, realization struck, and they cried out in unison, their voices sharp with disbelief. "You brought a supreme being into the city? What is wrong with you?" "Relax. I've got her under control," I replied nonchalantly. I then reached into my spatial storage and produced 2 unconscious figures. "Here, take them. They might need some therapy." I handed the unconscious guard captain to Anna and passed the equally unconscious Sean Brothwork to Jill. I felt a twinge of sympathy for the guard captain, but none at all for Sean. If anything, he had earned every mental bruise. Turning back to Susan, I asked in concern, "By the way, where's Dre?" "She's in the dungeon seal with Bloodette," Susan replied, "keeping her company." I nodded, a quiet smile forming on my lips as I thought of how far Dre had come. Almost unconsciously, my gaze drifted back to the gathered forces, to the city standing in unified silence. Only then did it truly sink in that this grand reception was a measure of my own journey as well, a reflection of just how far I had come. "Petra, stop scaring her and let go of her. That's not Bloodette, but her current best friend, Courtney," I said as I strode toward them. Petra was openly manhandling Courtney in public. The fact that Courtney had dressed with minimal restraint only made the scene more heated and steamy. Against Petra's overwhelming strength, Courtney was utterly powerless, unable to muster even the faintest resistance. The paparazzi could not have asked for a better spectacle. "Let go of me, itch," Courtney screamed, her voice ringing out as it proved to be the only defiance she could muster against Petra's monstrous strength. "But that still doesn't explain why I sense Bloodette's soul signature from her," Petra asked me, finally releasing the shaken Courtney. Courtney hurriedly adjusted her clothes, and for the first time in her short life, she regretted not dressing more modestly. Her embarrassment quickly hardened into anger, and she glared fiercely at Petra. "That's because Bloodette helped her forge her mutated ego gem," I explained before formally introducing them. "Courtney, this is Petra Petros, the Stone Supreme. She claims she was Bloodette's old best friend. Could you take her to Bloodette's dungeon seal? I'll join you after I finish greeting everyone." Courtney's eyes widened in shock. This was a huge deal as Bloodette had no recollection of her life before being sealed within the dungeon. Seeing someone emerge from her friend's forgotten past filled her with sudden joy, and she immediately forgave Petra's earlier actions. She extended her hand toward Petra and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Courtney, Wyatt's friend and Bloodette's best friend." Petra ignored the offered hand, snorting instead as she muttered, "We'll see about that." Courtney took the dismissal in stride and turned to me with a reassuring smile. "Leave this to me, Wyatt." As Courtney escorted Petra toward the dungeon seal, I moved quickly to Corey's side and gave her clear instructions. "Go with them and keep a close watch on Petra. If she shows any signs of acting out, don't hesitate to use Lil Beam and report to me immediately." "All right," Corey said, then tilted her head with an exaggerated drawl, her expression resembling a loan shark pressing a long overdue debtor. "But when are you finally going to help me acquire a new trait? I'll find a way to make it up to you. Now go, keep up with them," I urged Corey, implicitly promising that I would find a way to make it up to her for the long delay in her trait acquisition. Hearing my promise, she reluctantly hurried after Courtney and Petra, and as they departed, I discreetly signaled Demigod Redfall to dispatch Een Widow to support Corey from the shadows. While I had been preoccupied running across the card world, Demigod Redfall had been far from idle. He had located Een Widow's hideout and resurrected her using the contingency methods she herself had prepared, but with one single change. He used my primordial Calamity Daughter gem as the new vessel for her soul to arrive and sustain in the physical plane. Een Widow was more than pleased to see her son had found an even more powerful vessel for her resurrection. She willingly accepted the primordial Calamity Daughter gem as her new soul vessel. As a result, she was resurrected directly as my bloodkin. However, she was far from her peak. Her soul remained tainted by the breath of erosion, and her grimoire was still in Anna's possession. Even so, as a bloodkin, she was vastly stronger than most of the demigods present. Having fulfilled his promise to his mother, the last remnants of resistance within Redfall dissolved, and he too accepted his new status, successfully becoming a bloodkin. This sequence of events confirmed my hypothesis. The will of my Calamity Daughter gems played a decisive role in whether they would be accepted by my cursed bloodline and successfully transform into my bloodkin. With the immediate trouble handled, I turned to the people waiting to meet me. Most were familiar faces, though several strangers were mixed among them. Ah Sung-young, in particular, had arrived with numerous members of her political party and family. It seemed the live stream of my clash with the Emissary of Light had drawn far more attention than expected. Just as I neared the assembled guests, a reporter called out from within the crowd, "Master Wyatt, who won the duel?" The question made me pause. I turned toward the cluster of reporters, who were being held back by the fine gold guards. The noise quickly subsided as my gaze swept over them, and I answered plainly, "I won." Wasn't that obvious? The crowd immediately erupted into cheers, celebrating my victory as if it were their own. While I still had their attention, the reporters pressed forward with another question. Master Wyatt, one of them called, but the Emissary of Light claimed that he was the victor. How do you respond to that? If the fight were about who ran home first to lick their wounds, then yes, he won, because he was already back at his nest, I said with open scorn. But this was never about us. It was about protecting the southern citizens from outside threats like him. I'm pleased to announce that I managed to save the city's demigod guards, undoing his brainwashing. Soon, I'll begin treating the remaining citizens who were also ensnared by that false herald. I request their family members not to worry and to wait for the good news. Just as I was about to leave, one sharp-eyed journalist seized the brief opening and fired off a rapid barrage of questions. Master Wyatt, what is your relationship with wanted and notorious criminals such as Demigod Redfall, Een Widow, and others? Are you certain that someone hailed as the Southern Hope should be associating with figures like them? Are you attempting to build a personal army? What was the true purpose of today's display? Was it meant as a challenge to the Southern royal family? And speaking of the royal family, what exactly is the nature of your relationship with the Southern heir? Go ahead, kill me. I've already done my part. I reported the truth to the world, the man shouted as he lay slumped against the wall of a narrow back alley. He was drenched in filth, soaked with urine, vomit, and refuse, his back pressed into the grime-slick stone. I posted everything on the Grimoire network. By morning, all 5 regions will know what I uncovered. There's nothing you or your masters can do now. His clothing was impossible to recognize, shredded in multiple places and darkened by layers of dried and fresh blood. One trembling hand clutched his grimoire, while the other pressed desperately against the gaping wound torn through his hip, blood seeping between his fingers. Standing before him was a man dressed like an assassin crossed with a jester, his face concealed behind a grotesque clown mask. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, and the condescension in his gaze was unmistakable as he looked down at the broken figure at his feet and burst into manic laughter. Ha! Ha ha! The laughter cut off abruptly. The clown bent down, bringing his masked face close to the man lying at his feet, staring directly into his eyes as though trying to peer into his very soul. The man did not flinch, meeting that gaze with stubborn defiance. "Did you really?" the clown asked quietly. "I could kill you a second later. Check your post. See if it's still there." The man held the clown's gaze for a moment longer before doubt crept in. Unable to suppress it, he looked down at his grimoire. The post he had made was gone. It had been live for only a few minutes before being erased. He couldn't comprehend what had happened, and the fierce determination on his face slowly crumbled into helpless disbelief. The clown lowered his head further, bringing it almost cheek to cheek with him, and whispered, "Looks like your work here isn't finished. The world will never know what you uncovered, Reporter Cabe." The clown then shifted slightly, locking eyes with Cabe once more. "Now that you know this," he asked softly, "do you still want to die?" This time, Cabe let out a low chuckle. "Didn't you see the post discussion? My job's done, mate." The clown immediately accessed the post discussion thread. There were only a couple of comments, both from a single reader. Anonymous 1897. "What are you smoking, bro?" Anonymous 1897. "Holy SHD, the post just got deleted by the authorities." So, it wasn't a conspiracy theory, but the truth. Fortunately, I copied it and shared it with my community as a gag. The world needs to know about this. Even as the clown finished reading, both comments vanished. Anonymous 1897. User has deleted the comment. Anonymous 1897. User has deleted the comment. Seeing this, Cabe burst into genuine laughter. The sound grated on the clown's nerves, prompting him to snap. "What are you laughing about? It's just one person. I'll kill him too. His death will be on you." "I have no doubt about that," Cabe replied, his laughter fading as his voice steadied. "But thanks to me, the truth is already out there. The fate of worlds," he cried hoarsely, "has never been shaped by grand heroes or hollow theatrics, but by single individuals who had gone above and beyond to do their duty and refused to yield in the hardest of times. Mark my words, no matter how many people you and your masters kill, you can't hide the truth forever. It'll surface sooner or later." Not waiting for him to finish, the clown plunged his hand into the man's chest, tearing out his still-beating heart and crushing it without hesitation. As life drained from him, the man forced out his final words in a fading whisper. "Signing off." Reporter Connard Cabe. I stopped in my tracks to take a closer look at the reporter. He seemed familiar. He was one of the stubborn reporters Clown Mask had killed in her future vision for the Circle. In that vision, Clown Mask had assassinated countless card apprentices from different professions on the Circle's behalf, yet this one stood apart from all the rest. It was his final words that had given the present Clown Mask, whose mind had already been fractured by the future vision, the will to endure the Circle's brutal training, once more in the current timeline and eventually rebel against the Supreme Leader. Fight against them while pretending to be one of them. Clown Mask's future vision had been a single, long, painfully vivid dream. She did not emerge from it unscathed. To her, it had felt real, as though it were truly happening. In those few fleeting seconds, she had lived out an entire lifetime. In that future, Clown Mask had long since submitted to the Supreme Leader. As a result, the present Clown Mask, armed with the knowledge of what awaited her, already carried the heavy shadow of the Circle and the Supreme Leader deep within her mind. And she had been little more than a teenager at the time. When she emerged from the future vision, she had no will left to resist the Circle or the Supreme Leader. She had no intention of fighting back and chose instead to go with the flow, believing that submission would at least spare her from further ordeals. Yet in the moment she resigned herself to that fate, a single bright memory surfaced. The one good thing that had come from it all. Her daughter. That fragile comfort shattered almost as soon as it formed, crushed by the memories that followed. Her daughter's tragic birth, her brief and painful life, and her inevitable death. And yet, buried beneath that grief, another memory stirred. Cabe's final words echoed back to her, cutting through the despair like a blade. The fate of worlds was not decided by grand heroes or hollow displays, but by single individuals who had gone above and beyond to do their duty and refused to yield in the hardest of times. In that moment, the Clown Mask understood. Her daughter had existed because she had endured. Cabe's discovery had spread and helped the hero ABA Windsor because he had refused to break. Those who endured through suffering and pain, who did their part without yielding, were not rendered meaningless even by death. With that realization, Clown Mask bent to her fate that day, not in surrender, but in resolve. She chose to endure, to survive, and in doing so, to one day bend that very fate to her will. Reporter Connard. I called out, signaling the fine gold guards to let him through, after the hive spirit confirmed he was exactly who I believed him to be. An honest man, who respected his profession perhaps a little too much, and cherished his family just as deeply. Master Wyatt, you know my name? Connard asked in surprise as he stepped out from the crowd and came to my side. Behind his professional composure, I could sense a quiet admiration directed at me. Yes, I replied calmly. I've read several of your works. You do good reporting. I let that settle before addressing the questions he had raised earlier. You must have heard of my criminal rehabilitation and reintegration program. Demigod Redfall, Ian Widow, and the other members of the Sin Army are all rehabilitated criminals, sworn to serve for the rest of their lives. They are living proof that the program works. My voice carried evenly as I continued. That is why I urge world leaders to consider granting criminals, even the most heinous among them, a second chance through this program. I give you my assurance. If even one of them breaks their vow or steps out of line, I will bear twice the punishment alongside them. As for whether I am building a personal army, whether today was a display of power, or whether it was meant as a challenge to the Southern royal family, I said, meeting the gathered gazes, the answers are yes, yes, and no. Yes, I am building my own forces, I continued without hesitation. I do so precisely so I no longer need to rely on the Southern royal family's limited resources that can be used far more effectively and efficiently where they are truly needed. And as for my relationship with the Southern heir, I added, glancing toward the crowd, if it still hasn't been made obvious enough, then there's little more I can say to clarify it. Master Wyatt, what about the victims and their families? And what about your relationships with Jill Norley and Susan Tucci? Connard pressed on, his tone steady but unyielding. As the future prince consort, don't you think it's somewhat insulting to the Southern royal family, the Southern region, and the Southern citizens that you're involved with other women besides our future ruler? Once again, he struck at the questions everyone was thinking but none had dared to voice, especially the last one. Take a breath, Connard. I'm not running away, I said with a short laugh before answering him directly. What do victims and their families gain when criminals are simply locked away and kept alive on taxpayers' money? Peace of mind? No, they don't. At the very least, under my program, those criminals work to repay their sins. I continued without pause. After their daily needs are met, the remainder of their wages while working under me will be used to compensate their victims or the victims' families. You can find the full details on the Criminal Rehabilitation and Reintegration Program page on the Grimoire Network. As for Jill Norley and Susan Tucci, I began, but my words trailed off as my gaze drifted to Susan, who was watching the interview along with the others. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. Instead, she stepped forward and answered in my stead. Hello, Connard, she said calmly. I'm Susan Tucci, Wyatt's exclusive manager and girlfriend. You seem to be under a misconception. Wyatt will not be Anna's prince consort. She will be one of his queens. Madame Tucci, Connard asked, barely containing his shock. Are you saying that Master Wyatt will be the next Southern ruler? The entire venue fell into a graveyard-like silence, every breath held as they waited for her response. Behind Susan, Anna and Jill stepped forward, coming to a stop at her back, their presence adding weight to the moment. No, Susan replied without hesitation, her voice steady and assured. He won't be the next Southern ruler. He'll be the sole ruler of the entire card world. The world seemed to fall into absolute silence at her declaration, as though even the air itself had frozen. Even I found myself staring at her in disbelief. What in the world are you saying, woman? Are you trying to get your husband killed? Now the entire card world will see me as an enemy. I know women can hold grudges, but this is taking it too far. Yet when my gaze shifted to Anna and Jill, they didn't look shocked or uncertain. They agreed with Susan. No, more than that. They looked as though this was already a settled matter between them. Unable to help myself, I summoned my grimoire and checked the time, a single thought echoing through my mind. When did these three grow so close? Just how long was I stranded in the way beyond? Madame Tucci, you're pulling my leg, right? Connard said hurriedly, clearly trying to give Susan an opening, a chance to retract her statement. This isn't something to joke about on an occasion like this, especially with so many powerful eyes and ears present. Susan, however, remained unmoved. Her expression didn't waver, nor did she attempt to soften or take back her words. It was Anna who answered instead, her voice carrying like thunder across the venue. What do you mean, pulling your leg? There are countless worlds within the myriad realms beyond our own. The very existence of demons and monsters is proof of that. To face such external forces, we must stand united. She continued without hesitation. For too long, we've been divided, left vulnerable to threats from beyond. How much longer are we expected to remain on the defensive, repelling one demonic invasion after another? When will it be our turn to take the fight to them and end this cycle once and for all? Anna's gaze swept across the crowd. To do that, we must unite. And I believe Wyatt can make that happen. He is not merely the South's hope. He is the hope of the entire card world. With Susan openly announcing my bid to become the ruler of the Central region, and with Anna backing that claim, the crowd remained frozen in silence, struggling to process one shocking revelation after another. Even as understanding slowly dawned, no one dared to cheer or jeer. Graveyard silence once again filled the venue. Meanwhile, many of the unfamiliar faces who had come hoping to meet me, such as the family members and party companions of Agon Young, began to slip away quietly. They no longer wished to be associated with me. As maddening as that realization was, I understood their perspective. With a few words, Anna and Susan had turned me into the world's enemy, a singular existence threatening the established order of the 5 regions. The emissary of light no longer mattered. Nor did Gideon Grimm. Neither did the looming second demonic invasion. From this moment on, they would want to eliminate me first. Even Connard, who was known for always asking the right questions, was left completely stumped. The revelations were simply too much for him to process. He had been prepared to die to report the truth, but this was different. Faced with this, he would rather quit than report it. At first, he had been overwhelmed with pride at being singled out by the Southern Hope. Now, that pride curdled into regret. He should have kept his mouth shut. Yes, as a journalist, he had always pursued the truth no matter the cost, but this cost was far too high. What unsettled him, and many other Southerners, even more than the Southern Hope declaring his appetite for world domination, was the revelation that the Southern heir would be only one of his queens. She was the Southern jewel. How could she be one queen among many instead of the sole queen? The very idea felt absurd. If his strength had allowed it, he would have seized Southern Hope by the collar and demanded, "How dare you corrupt our princess, you beast?" Finally, suppressing his turmoil and forcing his thoughts into order, Connard asked solemnly, "Your Highness, Southern heir, is this the will of the Southern royal family and His Highness?" "No," Anna replied firmly. "My family and grandfather know nothing about this. This decision is mine and mine alone. Once again, it has nothing to do with my family." To drive the point home, she added without hesitation, "Also, I am no longer the Southern heir. My great-grandaunt, Serafina Heatsend, will soon be holding that position." At Anna's declaration, Connard's knees nearly gave out. Still, knowing the capricious nature of their Southern heir, he immediately pressed on. "Then, is this the will of His Highness?" "No," Anna said lightly, "but I've sent him a message. I should receive confirmation once he reads it. Grandpa never says no to me." Hearing that, I could only slap my forehead in sheer frustration. After realizing that everything he had heard so far was driven entirely by Anna's personal whim, Connard stopped treating her words with the same weight. He promptly bypassed both her and Susan and turned instead to Jill, shifting the topic. "Madam Jill," he asked formally, "do you also believe that the 5 regions should unite under a single banner to confront external threats such as the demon invasions? And if so, who do you believe should lead a united 5 regions?" "The current central government. I don't know about uniting the 5 regions or confronting external threats. Because I'm not a fighter but an innovator," Jill said bluntly. "So, according to me, what is needed is a regime change. Because of the monopolies enjoyed by the royal families and the major noble houses, the economy of the 5 regions has stagnated for far too long. That only changed when Wyatt introduced the VR universe." She didn't slow down, her words gaining momentum. "I say free the market for all. How long are you going to keep crippling the wheels of innovation? The VR universe is the perfect example of how innovation can boost the economy. And as its creator, I believe Wyatt is the best choice to lead a new regime, one focused on economic growth rather than old grudges and outdated traditions." As she spoke, Susan and Anna stared at her as if silently asking, "This isn't what we discussed." Jill didn't care in the slightest. She raised her voice and shouted, "Free the market to all. Let innovation breathe, and capital will follow." Finally, someone gave the crowd something they could cheer for. They quickly forgot the outrageous revelations Susan and Anna had made earlier and began to applaud and shout in unison, the celebration resuming as if nothing had happened. That was the nature of crowd mentality. They neither dared to oppose nor openly criticize Anna. After all, she was the Southern jewel. Instead, they chose to latch onto something safer and more appealing. Profit for all. "Madam Jill, aren't you from one of the major noble families?" Connard pressed on, continuing to do his duty despite the overzealous crowd already bent on cheering and celebrating. "Is your family willing to relinquish its monopoly and truly open the market to the common folk?" Jill's true background remained a mystery to most of the 5 regions. Given the audacious schemes she had used to amass vast wealth, and the fact that she had emerged from them without so much as a scratch, rumors had naturally spread that she belonged to a major noble family. She had been asked about this many times before, yet she had never confirmed nor denied those claims, solidifying this misconception. "Don't lump me together with those bigots. I am the sole descendant of demigod Norley, the unnamed founder of the 5 regions," Jill declared, her voice carrying across the venue. The cheering crowd gradually fell silent, shock rippling through them. Without waiting for Connard to ask another question, she rose slowly into the air, her presence commanding every eye and ear. When she spoke again, her voice was clear, resonant, and impossible to ignore. "Look at the people beside you. Look at your loved ones," Jill said. "Speak your wishes without fear. Speak them without financial chains, without inherited limits, without invisible hands choking your potential. For too long, your dreams have been measured by what you were allowed to want." She spread her arms wide. "From this moment onward, begin to imagine a future where innovation is not punished, where ambition is not taxed into submission, and where talent is not buried under tradition. A future where the market is free, where ideas rise or fall by their own worth, and where progress belongs to everyone, not just a chosen few." Her gaze swept across the stunned crowd. "We promise you the dawn of a new age. An age where opportunity flows as freely as will itself. An age where the 5 regions no longer crawl forward, shackled by the past, but surge ahead, driven by possibility." Jill smiled, sharp and unapologetic. Susan, clad in her armor, and Anna rose into the sky as well, coming to stand behind Jill. The 3 of them positioned themselves back to back, facing the crowd from different angles. In unison, their voices rang out across the venue. "Welcome the new era. Welcome the age of innovation. Welcome your hope, the true ruler of the card world, Dalton V. Wyatt. Wyatt, control your women before they become the death of you." Asung's voice rang in my ears as I watched my 3 queens in utter befuddlement, my mind echoing with a single thought. What in the world happened while I was stranded in the way beyond? I turned to her and replied dryly, "You should control your friend. She and her sisters are going to get their lover killed." "Whoa, you're shameless," Asung blurted out, clearly flustered, using indignation to mask her embarrassment. "Now that you've got your harem, I guess it was only a matter of time before you set your sights on world conquest. Since you already know that, how dare you address the true ruler without proper honorifics?" I said, leaning into the joke, unconcerned that others might misunderstand. After all, I did intend to unite the 5 regions and rule them, so I can focus on the Dark Realm. It had simply happened sooner than I planned. "That's not funny," Asung replied, her smile freezing as her tone turned stern. "Tell me you don't actually plan on conquering the world." "World conquest," I said lightly. "No, I'm planning world domination." Asung frowned and couldn't help but ask, "How are those 2 different?" "World conquest is what you attempt when you lack the strength to stand alone," I explained calmly. "You rely on alliances, negotiations, and borrowed power. World domination, on the other hand, requires none of that. Absolute strength is enough. Resistance becomes pointless." I met her gaze, making my meaning unmistakably clear. This wasn't a proposal. They were not being asked. They were being informed. They can accept it or try resisting it. It was happening. "You've all gone crazy," Asung exclaimed in sheer disbelief. She could hardly accept that the boy she had once seen as a ray of hope for a better future was now becoming the spark for a new regime, one that threatened to ignite civil war across all 5 regions. Just as she was about to lament that she had placed her faith in the wrong person, the boy spoke, as if reading her thoughts. "Don't worry," he assured her calmly. "No innocent blood will be shed. This is world domination, not conquest. Besides, it isn't my style to make others fight for what I want." After reassuring Asong, I turned my attention back to the venue. Most of the crowd had already dispersed, and those who remained were either working for me or people with nothing better to do. No matter how well-crafted or awe-inspiring Jill's words had been, they carried little weight. These were people barely getting by, and for them, lofty promises meant little. They were not enough to erase years of ingrained loyalty to the royal family and traditions. I understood what the girls were trying to do, but this was neither the right time nor the right place. Timing and location mattered. That was precisely why I had worked so hard to secure Morningstar University as the stage for announcing my plans. However, before I even had the chance to execute the first quarter of those plans using Morningstar University as the platform, they had unveiled everything to the entire world, without regard for preparation, timing, or setting. Now that it was out in the open, I had no choice but to move forward and make the best of the situation. The masters, who had been looking for an excuse to reach me by targeting the southern region and the royal family, now had more than enough justification. From this point on, they would pressure the southern region and the royal family to hand me over to them on a silver platter. Shaking my head, I headed towards Cindy with Asong in tow and asked, "Where are the freedom fighters? Weren't they invited?" "They weren't," Cindy replied. "The schedule was tight, and they were in the Lil Red Storm realm. It wasn't possible for them to make it back in time for the ceremony." She took full responsibility for the decision. Through Cindy's demeanor, I immediately understood there was more to it than she let on. With Henrik stationed in the central capital searching for Ned, the link between the freedom fighters and my forces in Sky Blossom City had been disrupted. Cindy was being discreet in front of others, careful not to expose the shortcomings in my organization and management to outsiders. Making a mental note about this shortcoming, I nodded at Cindy and said simply, "Good job." Then I turned to Asong. "What is it?" She had been following me closely, and I knew her well enough to recognize the signs. She wouldn't trail me like this unless she wanted something. Just as she hesitated, gathering the courage to speak her mind, a jolly voice suddenly called out from behind us, "Boss." It was Aurelia, the only person I knew who was even more shameless than me. The young, unstoppable Auriculian I had recruited and polished. She had defeated the Bright brothers single-handedly and taken charge of the Bright Lion gang. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood a tall, toned, and mature woman who closely resembled her, followed by a group of individuals who clearly formed the woman's entourage. The moment they recognized the woman at Aurelia's side, the expressions of Diana, Cindy, Asong, and the others turned solemn. In unison, they bowed respectfully and said, "City Lord Malvin." "Arise, there's no need for formalities," City Lord Malvin said, lifting her hand slightly as if brushing the bows aside, with a gentle yet encouraging smile on her face. "I'm just an old relic. You young people are the heroes of tomorrow. Don't bow your heads so easily, not ever again. Otherwise, I'll have to start worrying about our future." Then she turned to me. The warmth in her expression remained, but her gaze was sharp and intimidating. She didn't beat around the bush. "Master Wyatt," she asked plainly, "if you become the ruler of the card world, how will you be any different from the rulers we have now?" Listening to City Lord Malvin's words, Asong was shaken to the core. As a politician, she understood all too well the border city's significance and the political weight carried by the unstoppable Auriculian family. They were the only ones who came close to outshining the southern royal family's bloodline in the southern region and a strategic linchpin for all 5 regions against the empire. She couldn't believe that someone burdened with such authority and responsibility would even entertain the idea of challenging the existing order, let alone the current rulers themselves. Yes, City Lord Malvin had merely asked what Wyatt would do differently if he became the ruler of the card world. On the surface, it was a simple question. But given who was asking it, those in power would never see it that way. To them, it would sound like a direct challenge to their authority, an open crack in the foundation of their rule. In their eyes, it would amount to nothing less than treason. The consequences would be absolute. The entire Malvin family, including all its branch families, would be wiped out. Asung couldn't comprehend why City Lord Malvin would willingly take such a risk just to ask that question. Knowing the price Malvin was gambling by doing so, Asung found herself listening intently, wondering whether the answer would truly be worth the cost. Susan, Anna, and Jill slowly descended next to their beloved. They had heard my conversation with City Lord Malvin. They, too, wanted to know what I planned to do after world domination. I scratched my head and let out a quiet breath, answering in a tone that was almost casual despite the weight of the moment. Honestly, City Lord Malvin, I just want to live a chill life, I said. I don't crave power, thrones, or people kneeling before me. All I ever wanted was the freedom to do my own research, craft my cards, and live without constantly being dragged into other people's gambits. My gaze hardened slightly as I continued without pausing. But the world doesn't let you stay peaceful if you're weak. The more I tried to stay out of power struggles, the more they came looking for me. Criminals, rulers, demons, masters, everyone wanted to decide my fate for me. After a brief, deliberate pause, I shrugged and revealed. So I chose the simplest solution, becoming the ruler of the card world. For me, it doesn't mean one with the authority to rule all, but one with the most freedom in the entire world. I'll take that seat not to dominate the world, but to stop others from interfering with my freedom and to secure as much of it as possible. I met her eyes squarely and stressed. I don't want to rule people. I want the authority to live life on my own terms. If absolute power is the price of a peaceful, chill life, in this world and across the myriad worlds, then I'll earn it. City Lord Malvin's gaze lingered on mine for a long moment. Then she inclined her head in a formal bow and introduced herself. Your Highness Wyatt, I am Tess Malvin, City Lord of Border City and matriarch of the Malvin family. At her words, jaws dropped all around us. The way she addressed me was a clear declaration, to me and to everyone present, that she had accepted me as the ruler of the card world. Please allow Border City and the Malvin family to be part of your journey, she finished. If that's what you want, then sure. Welcome aboard, I replied, extending my hand. Our gazes locked as she took my hand in a firm grip, and we shook on it. The turn of events was far too shocking for everyone present, especially for those who truly understood the implications of Tess Malvin formally affirming my claim as the ruler of the card world and allying with me. Conrad Cabe, who stood not far away, witnessed everything in vivid detail. What he had dismissed as a poorly conceived joke was now hardening into an unavoidable reality. His mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing and hearing. Was this history in the making, or a tragedy waiting to unfold, or both? Whichever it was, one thing was certain. The storm would sweep across the entire world in the form of Dalton v. Wyatt. For a long, momentous beat, the atmosphere grew so tense and solemn that it felt as though even breathing aloud might shatter it. Then there was Aurelia. Her shamelessness was potent enough to melt the thickest ice. She scratched the back of her head and asked innocently, Boss, since my mother joined our organization after me, does that make me her senior? The question instantly shattered the tension. Laughter burst out across the venue from nearly everyone present, with the sole exceptions of Tess and her entourage, who remained stone-faced. Before I could even respond, Aurelia turned toward her mother, a wide grin spreading across her face as she shouted, Hey, cute juniors, drop down and give me 100,000 squats. Slap. Refusing to indulge her daughter's nonsense, Tess struck her across the face with such force that Aurelia spun through the air for several seconds before crashing into the ground, carving a human-sized dent into the pavement. Aurelia never saw it coming. Still, thanks to her traits and physique, she quickly regained consciousness and recovered enough to crawl out of the crater. She then looked up at me and complained, Boss, these juniors are way too arrogant and rebellious. Teach them a lesson for me, will ya? Sorry, honey, I replied calmly. You lost to her. That makes her your senior. As I spoke, I tossed her a storage card loaded with elixirs and potions for healing, recovery, and mental strength. Take these and try again next time. The moment the card landed in her hands, Aurelia sprang to her feet and slipped it into her grimoire's card holder without hesitation as she thanked me aloud. Clearly, she had been exaggerating her injuries. The real reason I rewarded her so generously was simple. She had defeated the Bright Brothers and took charge of Bright Lion's gang far ahead of schedule than I had anticipated, proving she had been working harder than I had given her credit for. "Let's find a better place to continue this party, shall we?" I said, giving the venue a quick scan. Declaring world domination had scared off all the fakes and the faint-hearted. A shame it turned out to be almost everyone except Border City. Quality over quantity, I guess. "Your Highness," City Lord Malvin began, but I cut her off gently. "Madam Tess, my freedom doesn't come from stepping on yours. If you get what I mean, skip the formalities." "Yes, Mother. Just call boss, boss," Aurelia chimed in, folding her hands behind her back and leaning backward with exaggerated ease. She immediately froze under her mother's glare, a look that clearly said, "So now you remember I'm your mother? Where was that respect a few seconds ago?" City Lord Malvin controlled her turmoil and said, "Master Wyatt, before we go, with your permission, I would like to make a few arrangements for my people." "Sure, go ahead." I had a pretty good idea of what she was talking about. The freedom fighters in charge of the city's array had already informed me of it. After getting my silent approval, City Lord Malvin cast a glance at Cindy, Diana, and the others. Then she raised one arm calmly and said, "This is how it's done." The sky answered her. A deep, thunderous roar rolled across the city as a full platoon of dragon riders descended in perfect formation. Their arrival wasn't sudden or chaotic, but practiced discipline, like a marching army made of living legends. Massive shadows swept across the streets as colossal forms passed overhead, wing beats striking the air in slow, disciplined rhythm. Row after row of dragons flew past, scales like living armor, eyes burning with cold intelligence. The riders sat unmoving in their saddles, back straight, banners snapping in the wind. It wasn't a show of aggression. It was a declaration of the birth of new power and authority. These were SSS rank hound dragons, the dragons of the hunt. Their senses were so refined that scent alone allowed them to distinguish truth from lies. Their sense of smell could predict approaching calamities, glimpse threats seconds before they manifested, and instinctively judge true intent. They were the perfect sentinels, perfect wardens a card apprentice could ever find. They were a force whose mere presence meant no one could intrude without being noticed. In Clown Mask's future vision, through Tessa's generosity, the Western and Eastern forces learned that the Hound Dragons could identify demigod worshippers hidden among their ranks, as their sense of smell exposed a person's true intent. By the time that knowledge spread, however, the damage had already been done. It was too late. After circling the city once, the formation tilted upward in flawless unison and shot into the heavens, vanishing beyond the clouds as suddenly as it had appeared. The city soon settled back into silence as the Hound Dragons took up their positions above it, ensuring that none of the emissary of Light's fanatics could enter without being detected. Fortunately, Corey had taken Lil Bame with her into the dungeon seal. Lil Bame and Dre being in the same place sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. But it wasn't. Dre was no longer a helpless little pixie. She could travel freely between the planes of the living and the dead, resurrect the fallen, and wield the breath of erosion without limitation. If anything, it was Lil Beam that needed to be careful. One misstep, and it would meet a painful end, its soul tainted and tormented by the breath of erosion. A pixie who dared to taunt daily, a celestial, was hardly going to be intimidated by a giant serpent. Master Wyatt, with this Hound Dragon platoon watching over your city, no pest will be able to enter without being noticed ever again, City Lord Malvin said with quiet confidence. Her generosity confirmed my suspicions about why she had come to me, and why she had chosen to act now of all times. There were many factors at play, but this had to be the decisive reason as to why she stepped forward while others hesitated or abandoned the idea altogether. "Thank you, Madam Tess. That's very thoughtful of you," I said sincerely. At that moment, Diana stepped forward and guided us toward the TSR Guild, where she had already made arrangements for me to entertain my guests. Meanwhile, Ah-sung hurried to Anna's side, who lifted her and carried her along without a word. Inside the TSR Guild's main hall, after the initial small talk, most people gradually returned to their duties and filtered out, leaving behind Anna, Jill, Asung, Tess and her entourage, and finally Aurelia, who was still shamelessly trying to assert her seniority over her mother by standing right next to me. I guess she was trying to collect interest on all the neglect and hardship she had suffered growing up. Seeing that Tess had already demonstrated her sincerity, I didn't waste time testing her further and asked directly, "Madam Tess, how can I help you?" "This." City Lord Malvin hesitated, clearly worried that I might misunderstand her earlier gesture as a transactional move rather than an expression of loyalty and conviction. However, now that the question had been asked, she knew there was no point in retreating. Straightening her posture, she met my gaze and spoke plainly. "Master Wyatt, at the risk of sounding rude, I would like you to share the technique you use to cure those manipulated by that false herald who calls himself the emissary of light," she said. "Many of our innocent citizens and brave soldiers have fallen prey to his sinister ability. Thanks to the presence of the hound dragons, we were able to detain them before they could do anything they would later regret. We could not find a way to cure them, so we imprisoned them instead. With your grace, we wish to finally cure them and put an end to their suffering." Divine enlightenment. Just as I had suspected, Tess approached me even after everyone else had fled, despite hearing me declare my plans for world domination, because after witnessing me cure those suffering from divine enlightenment, she had already chosen her side. A side where she would not have to sacrifice her loyal citizens and brave soldiers for some distant greater good that had no place for them. The circumstances of Border City were dire, financially and otherwise. They were so strained that even the city lord's youngest child had to take on mercenary work just to earn resources for her practice, while the older ones juggled 2 or more jobs. One was their duty to the city, and the rest were taken on simply to earn enough to keep their realm progressing and prevent it from falling behind. If even the city lord's children lived under such conditions, it was easy to imagine the hardships endured by ordinary citizens. All of this stemmed from the same cause. Border City received little to no budgetary support from the Southern royal family, yet was taxed more heavily than the Southern capital itself. The central government and other regions had offered aid, but as true Southerners, Border City had always refused it. Not a single citizen resented the city lord for her decision. To them, Border City was the living symbol of the unstoppable Auriculian's patience toward the Southern royal family, for how they repaid his loyalty. In their eyes, Border City was the true capital of the southern region, and so it was only fitting that it shouldered the heaviest taxes. More than half of Border City's population were the descendants of the soldiers who had once served under the unstoppable general. Of the remainder, many of them had personally served under the various city lords of Border City during their time in the Southern Army. Even now, much of the younger generation of the city were serving in the Southern Army alongside Tessa's heir. No matter their achievements or accolades, once they completed their duty to the southern region, they would always return to Border City to fulfill their duty to their home. Over time, a saying began to circulate throughout the 5 regions. The sun might forget to rise one day, but the card apprentices of Border City would never forget their roots or their duty. Each of them returned to Border City not for wealth or fame, but out of loyalty and gratitude. Fulfilling their duty to the city was their way of honoring that bond. This, more than anything, was why Border City continued to exist to this day. Another reason was that every direct descendant of the unstoppable general had, without exception, proven themselves worthy of that loyalty. Time and again, they lived up to the faith placed in them. That was why, even after learning the truth about Border City's circumstances, many soldiers who had once fought alongside them chose to immigrate there of their own will. If I didn't know better, I might have mistaken Border City for a cult. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. It was simply that after experiencing what they had endured, one's perspective on life inevitably changed. Priorities shifted. The things you once worked and fought for began to feel hollow, while ideas you might have mocked before suddenly felt meaningful and worth pursuing. Border City embodied one of the most common transformations seen among soldiers who had faced true combat, those who had clawed their way back from the jaws of death itself. Those soldiers often couldn't put it into words, but they understood one thing clearly. Money and fame were not what they wanted to dedicate the rest of their lives to. Nor did they wish to remain tools for others to profit from, whether through wealth or reputation. It was in moments like these that the experience of the unstoppable general felt relatable to them. The choices made by the unstoppable general at the end of his life began to make sense to them. They felt compelled to look closer, to understand his path. And if what they saw resonated, they would abandon the lives they had struggled and fought to build and start anew in Border City. It was this gathering of like-minded card apprentices, along with their descendants, that kept Border City alive despite all its shortcomings. Together, they continued to prove to the 5 regions a truth that had become a saying. The sun might forget to rise one day, but the card apprentices of Border City would never forget their roots or their duty. The only person to break Border City's long-standing tradition was Aurelia. Instead of joining the Southern Watch or the Army, she had joined the Bright Lion Gang. Considering the neglect and hardship she had grown up in the Border City, it wasn't surprising that she lacked any strong attachment to those traditions. And yet, at her core, she embodied everything one would expect of a card apprentice from Border City. I glanced at Tess and the members of her entourage. Their expressions were tense and contemplative as they waited patiently for my answer. Breaking the silence, I said, "Divine enlightenment is one of the abilities of the false herald's origin card. It forcibly converts his enemies into his fanatic believers. The reason your people failed to find a counter or a cure to it is because it directly affects the victim's will." No wonder, an elderly card demigod among Tessa's entourage exclaimed, realization dawning on his face. No matter how much I investigated, I could never locate the source of the change within them. He paused, then frowned deeply. But from what I know, not even a celestial can manipulate a being's will. Hearing that, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Then, I quickly reined it in and apologized. Haha, sorry. But that's honestly the funniest thing I've heard all day, I said. That idea is nothing more than a small white lie, something passed down to keep overthinkers sane. Don't blindly believe everything your predecessors said. My smile faded slightly as I continued, more matter of fact. With the right means, or enough strength, it's entirely possible to bend even a celestial's will to one's whim. So, the notion that a being's will could never be tampered with is simply untrue. Please don't apologize, Master Wyatt, the elderly demigod said, gently deflecting my words. It was my own lack of talent and capability that made me overly reliant on ancient knowledge. Instead of questioning it and seeking true understanding, I began to follow it blindly as truth. There's no need to be so harsh on yourself, I replied calmly. Everyone has their own pace. Some flowers bloom in days, others take years. Don't sell yourself short, demigod Cecil. I continued, my tone sincere. You've done remarkable work, especially breeding SSS rank hound dragons outside their dungeon and raising them as mounts without reducing them to card summons. That alone is an achievement few could replicate. I believe your best days are still ahead of you. As I spoke, I recalled the dossier Hive Spirit had compiled on him. This was a man who could have joined one of the top 10 universities, yet instead chose Border City, where he received only a fraction of the resources and recognition those institutions would have offered, all for the sake of his principles. He was, without question, a man worthy of respect. Hearing me address him by name, Cecil's eyes lit up with quiet pride. It wasn't his arrogance, but my recognition. Though I was far younger than him, my works and achievements carried enough weight that being acknowledged by me felt like an honor to him. He inclined his head slightly and said, "Thank you, Your Highness, for your generous praise." "Hey, old man, don't make the boss repeat himself," Aurelia barked immediately, seizing the opening without hesitation. Cecil, Tess, and the rest of the entourage all shot her a sharp glare. Aurelia, who never needed much encouragement to stir trouble, puffed out her chest and said loudly, "Boss, are you seeing these newbies? Their eyes are full of arrogance. I think they need to be taught a lesson. What do you say, boss?" Despite the confidence in her voice, she retreated behind me at remarkable speed, fully aware that her mother was about to slap her senseless again, just like last time. And she was absolutely right. Tessa's eyes were grim, yet her lips stretched from ear to ear in a wide smile as she addressed her beloved daughter. "Aurelia, sweetie, come to your mother. Let me take a good look at you. It's been a while since I last saw you. Have you lost weight?" "As if I'd fall for that trick again, mother," Aurelia scoffed from behind me, using me as a shield. She knew that a single misstep was all it would take for her mother, with her terrifying abilities, to grab her across the room and knock her unconscious. Tessa's smile only grew wider. She calmly took out a storage card and waved it enticingly. Knowing I'd get to see you, I brought your favorite snacks from Border City. Why don't you come take them and share them with your friends? Really? Aurelia asked, saliva already dripping from the corner of her mouth as she peeked out from behind me. If you don't want it, I'll send it to your brother, Tess said calmly, knowing exactly which strings to pull when it came to her children. Her children might have believed they were neglected, but for a demigod who had once fought multiple supreme beings at the same time, watching over half a dozen children while fulfilling her duties as city lord and family matriarch was hardly a challenge worth mentioning. If they had seen how her own parents had raised her, they would be begging for her forgiveness instead of complaining. As for Aurelia being ostracized by her family and the city's citizens due to doubts surrounding her birth, Tess believed it was something she needed to grow accustomed to. No matter how many praises the world sang of the unstoppable general or border city, they were still viewed as outsiders. Better to get used to loneliness sooner rather than later. Compared to children who had been forced to pick up knives and fight for their lives, Aurelia had lived far more comfortably. If nothing else, it would build character. No, I want it, Aurelia blurted out as she rushed forward. She was just as greedy as she was shameless. She would rather risk being slapped unconscious than miss the off chance that her mother wasn't trying to trick her this time. The moment Aurelia reached for the storage card, Tess pulled it back. Aurelia immediately dropped to her knees, ready to beg for forgiveness, but a hand stopped her. It was Tess. She looked into her daughter's eyes and sighed inwardly. The Auriculian bloodline doesn't deserve a whimsically kind spirit like yours, my dear daughter. She brushed Aurelia's messy hair aside and placed the storage card into her hands. Go. Share it with your friends. Aurelia nodded eagerly as she accepted it. Instead of leaving immediately, however, she equipped and rummaged through the card, took out 2 neatly packed boxes of tea powder, and handed them to Jill and Anna. Madams, she said seriously, make the boss drink this tea with gobblenut kernels. You'll hear good news within a month. Before either of them could react, she stuffed the boxes into their hands and bolted out of the room as if running for her life. Seeing this, Asung burst into laughter. Shaking my head, I picked up where I had left off. Right, where was I? To counter divine enlightenment, I created celestial empowerment. It uses celestial force to empower the victim's will, allowing them to resist the influence of divine enlightenment. It's built upon celestial force and my own physique, which is why I can't teach it to you. At my words, the light in Tessa's eyes, as well as in Cecil's and the rest of her entourages, dimmed noticeably even before I could finish speaking. Ignoring their disappointment, I continued. However, I can create a card that will allow those who can borrow celestial force from the card worlds to mimic celestial empowerment. The card can also be used on oneself to resist divine enlightenment, though only to a certain extent. Hearing that I could create celestial empowerment cards for them, Tess and her entourage immediately brightened. Their eyes shone with even greater brilliance than before. A card was far easier to wield than a technique that required a certain level of mastery before it could be applied effectively. As for the restriction of needing celestial force to activate the card, it posed little issue for them. Many veteran semi-card demigods and card demigods had long reached the one with the world state, allowing them to borrow celestial force from the card world itself. None could do so to the extent I could, but it would be more than sufficient for them to help free their comrades who had fallen prey to the emissary of light's divine enlightenment. They had come seeking a technique to free their comrades from the emissary of light's sinister grip, only to be offered something even better: celestial empowerment cards. It would save them enormous time and simplify matters greatly. Yet they barely had a moment to savor that relief before another concern set in. The cost of the cards. From the way celestial empowerment was described, it was clearly more than a situational counter to divine enlightenment. It was an exceptional support card, one that would remain valuable long after the current crisis passed. How would one even begin to put a price on such a thing? From what they had heard of the Southern Hope, they knew one thing for certain. His cards, and his card crafting services, were anything but cheap. They had already presented their prized Hounddragon platoon as a joining gift, a symbol of their sincerity in standing beneath his banner. That platoon was their most recently trained batch, and there were still another 1 or 2 years for a new batch to be trained. Now, they had nothing of comparable value left to offer in exchange for enough celestial empowerment cards. Maybe they should settle on one for now and focus on freeing their comrades from their nightmares. What's wrong? Anna asked, noticing the restrained expressions on Tessa's face and among her entourage. Earlier, she hadn't interfered, aware of the tension between their two families. But after Aurelia shattered the ice with her tea powder gift and goblinut seed advice, Anna reconsidered. At the same time, Ah-sung tugged lightly on Anna's sleeve, signaling her stand down. She and Jill both understood Tessa's predicament. They had found the cure they were seeking, but they couldn't afford it. And given that Anna's royal family was one of the reasons Border City was in such dire financial state to begin with, Anna stepping in now would only seem like mockery rather than help. Before the awkwardness could spiral into something ugly, I spoke. Can you guys stay the night? I said simply. I'll prepare 1,000 celestial empowerment cards for you by tomorrow morning. Does that work? I waited for Tess to respond, but she and her entourage exchanged quick glances before she answered carefully. Master Wyatt, one will be more than enough. Don't rush. Hear me out, I said, asking Tess not to jump to conclusions and to let me finish. When she and the others nodded, I continued, here's the deal. Out of the 1,000 celestial empowerment cards, use as many as you need. Consider those cards as my gift to you. Then help me sell the rest for a 10% commission. I know the commission is small, but Border City will have exclusive sales rights to the celestial empowerment cards. I looked at Tess directly. I don't need to teach you how to leverage exclusive rights, do I? In return, I want to see Border City more prosperous than the southern capital. I want everyone who ever underestimated Border City to die of envy. Can I trust you to do that? At my words, Tessa's eyes reddened, and members of her entourage clenched their fists, struggling to keep their emotions in check. Even so, a single tear slipped from Cecil's right eye. Then, as one, Tess and her entourage shouted, Yes, Your Highness. We will not disappoint your trust in us. Good, I said with a nod. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning. With that, I turned to leave, already planning the array formation I would use to craft the celestial empowerment cards in bulk. You're high, Master Wyatt, Tess called out, drawing my attention. She spoke quickly. We can't remain away from Border City for long. The Empire's card apprentices have been unusually active ever since the Emissary of Light broke through to the demigod realm. By now, they should already know I've left the city, and they may be preparing to make trouble. I was thinking of leaving Cecil behind. He can collect the cards tomorrow morning. I murmured, sinking into thought. Among Tess and her entourage, only Tess herself possessed the will and strength to resist divine enlightenment long enough to escape with her life. With a celestial empowerment card in hand, she could even give the Emissary of Light some trouble. Without her by their side, I wasn't convinced that Cecil, or even the entirety of Tessa's entourage, would be enough to safeguard the cards, let alone deliver them safely. Then let's do this, I said after a brief pause. I'll arrange for a team of platinum-grade array masters, led by a diamond-grade array master, to accompany you back to Border City. Together, they'll be able to set up a teleportation hub in the city, just a single teleportation array overnight. I continued, laying it out clearly. Once that's done, Border City will be connected to my teleportation network. From then on, you can personally come every other day to collect a new batch of celestial empowerment cards, starting tomorrow morning. That should solve the problem, right? Tess and her entourage exchanged looks before nodding in agreement. Turning to Anna, I instructed, Anna, help them find Cindy and arrange the team of array masters, will you? Yes, Anna replied with an eager nod, clearly seeing this as an opportunity to clear the lingering tension between her and Tess, now that they would be working together going forward. All right, Jill, see Ah-sung out. I'll get started on those cards, I said, deliberately teasing Ah-sung. She had clearly wanted to speak to me for a while now, but every time she finally had the chance, she hesitated and lost her nerve. She knows the way out. She doesn't need me for that, Jill replied dryly. Then she turned to me and complained, Wyatt, you said I'd be in charge of the slime fairy cards, but they wouldn't even let me in. Ignoring Ah-sung entirely, I corrected Jill. I never said you'd be in charge of the slime fairy cards. I already have capable people handling their creation. What I said was that you'd be in charge of selling them across the other 4 regions. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's what I meant. I stepped closer, pulled her into an embrace, and spoke quietly. Jill, you need to stop this. Why are you trying to steal credit from our own people? That's not a good strategy if you want to beat Susan and Anna, especially when they both have the home field advantage. Wait, I thought you wanted us to get along. Now you're provoking me by bringing them up? Jill asked, rolling her eyes. She knew exactly what I was doing, using Anna and Susan to push her into backing off. Even so, she had to admit the point I was making wasn't wrong. She quickly realized that playing the cold, lone wolf role here would only hurt her, not them. Susan was practically the girl next door to everyone in my organization, familiar and easy to approach. As for Anna, with most of the organization's employees being Southerners, they adored her by default. Now more than ever, her marrying their boss felt like validation for the work they were doing. They couldn't have been prouder. Which meant that, when it came to popularity, Jill was clearly the least favored of the 3 among employees. And if she wanted to become the principal wife, she would need to amass more fame than the other 2. Otherwise, judging by how things were going, she would end up dead last. And that was something she absolutely refused to accept. Gotta keep the pan hot, I said. I want the 3 of you to get along, sure, but I don't want you ganging up on me like you did today. You've shown me how a woman's grudge can sneak up on you when you least expect it. Now that you know what the 3 of us can do together, Jill warned, pulling back slightly, don't go sniffing around under other skirts. She didn't even bother acknowledging how much of my careful planning they had just flushed down the drain. Well, in their defense, they were only acting in what they believed was my best interest. So clearly, they couldn't be wrong. I suppose this was entirely my fault for having the audacity to choose all 3 of them instead of choosing just one. Jill slipped free of my embrace and added, think hard about that. I've got a few things to go fix. With that, Jill hurried out, intent on correcting the damage she'd caused. She knew it was too late to change people's first impressions of her, but she also knew one thing just as well. As long as she helped them all make a ton of money, today's minor clashes would be forgotten, replaced with admiration, if not outright worship. After she left, I turned to Ah-sung and asked dryly, you're still here? Stop being an asshole, Ah-sung said, fully aware that I was teasing, knowing she herself was struggling to say whatever it was she wanted to say. Ah-sung, I've got very little time and far too many things to deal with, I said flatly. Whatever it is, spit it out already. My party fired me. I had to vacate my seat in assembly. I'm effectively a civilian now, Ah-sung said at last. She hadn't shared the news with anyone else, and didn't want to, especially not with someone who had saved her life more than once. Yet, she ended up sharing in a moment of weakness. Was this because of what happened today? I asked. Earlier, her party members had been all smiles when they arrived to greet me, but the moment Susan started talking about world domination, they had vanished like smoke. It wasn't hard to guess what followed. They'd likely wasted no time cutting Ah-sung loose to distance themselves. First, she'd been hunted by the supreme leader. Now this. Her luck was on a steady downward spiral. Does it matter? Ah-sung replied quietly, brushing off the question. She clearly didn't blame me for it. What I didn't understand was something else entirely. Why was she telling me this instead of her friend, Anna? I guess not, I said, making no attempt to comfort her. Truthfully, I had considered recruiting her before, but now I had Jill, and Ah-sung was far too rigid for the kind of organization I was building. If my secret about the Calamity Daughter gems ever came to light, I was absolutely certain she wouldn't be able to look past it. Still, seeing her standing there alone, I couldn't bring myself to stay indifferent. I transferred an encrypted blueprint of the array formation for crafting celestial empowerment cards that Hive Spirit had just processed, along with a short note, directly to her grimoire. I've shared a file with you, I said. Help me deliver it to Daly at Lil Redstorm. Go find Cindy. She'll make the necessary arrangements. You don't mind, right? No problem, Ah-sung replied with a tired sigh. I don't have anything better to do anyway. She gave a half-hearted wave and turned to leave. Watching her retreating figure, lost and alone, I shook my head thinking, a glimpse of the future ought to cheer her up. With the matter of the celestial empowerment cards settled, I decided to pay a visit to the dungeon seal. With Corey, Lil Beam, Bladette, Courtney, and Petra all gathered there. It was practically a convention of troublemakers. The fact that nothing had exploded yet was already a small miracle. Either they were behaving themselves, or chaos had already broken out, and I simply hadn't heard about it yet. The thought alone made me quicken my pace. I hurried toward the dungeon seal in the basement of the TSR Guild Tower. Yet just as I reached the basement and was about to step into the dungeon seal, a voice spoke. There was no warning, no echo, no direction to turn toward. It didn't roll across the air or rise from the ground. Instead, it manifested directly beside my ear, bypassing distance, walls, and even conscious thought. The voice carried a majestic, crushing weight, one that pressed down on the mind itself as its declaration. As the declaration continued, I turned on my heel and rushed out of the basement, heading straight for the tower's terrace. The proclamation was being delivered through the greater array formation that spanned the entire southern region, declaring to everyone within its borders. By the authority of the southern region, one of the 5 regions that constitute the world's governing order, this declaration is issued and made absolute. Let all who hear this voice be recorded as witnesses. Dalton Venera Wyatt, formerly recognized as a registered citizen of the southern region, is hereby charged with high treason against regional authority and the established world order. By claiming dominion beyond the authority of his region, by asserting sovereignty over territories not lawfully recognized by any regional charter or by the central government, and by declaring intent to dominate the world order, he has violated the foundational accords that bind the 5 regions. Effective immediately, Dalton Venera Wyatt is stripped of all rights, titles, protections, and legal recognition previously granted by the southern region. His name is expunged from southern civic registries, bloodline records, and all regionally recognized succession rolls. His citizenship within the southern region is revoked retroactively. The voice paused for a breath, invisible pressure pressing against the mind and weighing on the heart, making its presence unmistakable. The declaration was not yet finished. The city known as Sky Blossom City, presently under Dalton Venera Wyatt's control, is hereby denounced. Its southern regional charter is annulled. Its status as a legally recognized city under any royal authority or central government jurisdiction is dissolved. From this moment onward, Sky Blossom City is classified as a hostile sovereign entity, existing outside the lawful structure of the 5 regions. All individuals residing within Sky Blossom City, operating under its administration, or swearing allegiance to Dalton Venera Wyatt are declared complicit in treason against their respective regions. They forfeit regional protection. They forfeit diplomatic recognition under both royal and central authority. They will be treated accordingly. The voice hardened, as unforgiving as it had been from the very beginning. All regional trade contracts with Sky Blossom City are terminated. All inter-regional transit rights to and from Sky Blossom City are withdrawn. All sanctioned routes recognized by the southern region and the central government are hereby void. Any external party, whether royal, central, or independent, that provides material aid, passage, intelligence, or contractual support to Sky Blossom City or to Dalton Venera Wyatt shall be judged as collaborators under inter-regional sanction law. Then came the word that truly mattered, spoken only after every other sentence had been hammered into place. Dalton Venera Wyatt is excommunicated from the regional order. No royal family shall shelter him. No central statute shall recognize him. No regional or central tribunal shall hear his appeal. By decree, he stands outside the lawful governance of the 5 regions. Another pause followed, measured and deliberate, as if the voice were allowing the weight of its words to settle before continuing. Under the regional sanction protocol, the southern region reserves the unrestricted right to enact military, contractual, and all enforcement against Sky Blossom City and Dalton Venera Wyatt at a time of its choosing. This declaration does not require ratification by the central government. This declaration is final. The voice concluded without ceremony. Let this be known. Let this be remembered. Let no one claim ignorance. And then, just as abruptly as it had manifested, the presence withdrew. Sky Blossom City still stood, but every soul within it understood the truth. From this moment onward, the world no longer acknowledged Sky Blossom City or Dalton V. Wyatt as part of the lawful order of the 5 regions. but only as a defiant threat needed to be neutralized. After hearing the declaration in full, I realized what the Southern Princess was truly doing. She was using this decree to protect both the Southern region and me at the same time. She had the Southern royal family invoke the Regional Sanction Protocol, reserving for themselves the unrestricted right to enact military, contractual, and all forms of enforcement against me and Sky Blossom City at a time of their choosing. This way, the other regions couldn't accuse the Southern region of sheltering a terrorist, nor could they act freely against me. Any attempt to pursue, capture, or punish me would now fall under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Southern royal family, as they alone held the right to enforce the sentence. I understood exactly why the Southern Princess had orchestrated this. And yet, despite that understanding, I still couldn't help but hope that my guess was right. Too much was at stake. The lives of everyone in Sky Blossom City, the freedom fighters, and every person who had placed their trust in me all hung in the balance. However, no matter the reason the Southern Princess chose to do this, she gave me a starting point to begin my card world domination. Just as I managed to prepare myself for the rapidly developing situation, more declarations rang out in succession, one after another. The other 4 regions issued their counter-decrees in direct response to the Southern region's declaration. They all asserted the same position, that the Southern region's excommunication was valid, that Sky Blossom City no longer existed within the lawful structure of the 5 regions, and that I stood outside all regional and central protection. Each of them also rejected the Southern region's claim to exclusive authority over this matter. They reserved for themselves the unrestricted right to act against me and Sky Blossom City, directly opposing the Southern region's attempt to monopolize military, contractual, and all forms of enforcement in this matter. Together, they severed all contracts and trade with the Sky Blossom City and all organizations connected to me, authorized military action without restraint, and lifted all limits on surveillance and intervention against us. Lastly, the Central region sealed everything into an official record, confirming that any region could move against me and all organizations run by or connected to me at will. From that moment on, it was no longer a regional matter. It was the world's. Basically, the Southern Princess acted first, trying to use the Regional Sanction Protocol to turn the situation in our favor. However, the other 4 regions and the central government responded by declaring me the enemy of the world, invoking the authority of world order to supersede the Regional Sanction Protocol. That was to say, from that moment on, no region was bound to wait, negotiate, or defer. Anyone could come for me. Anytime. Anywhere. How did it come to this? The teleportation network was meant to be my third world-changing innovation, following silver milk powder and the VR universe. I had planned to connect every city across the 5 regions through my teleportation network, funded by the sales of slime fairy cards and other aids from the cities themselves and the 5 regions. From there, I would unveil the Freedom Megalopolises in Lil Red Storm to the entire world, leading to bigger things and projects. I was supposed to leverage the undeniable results of my criminal rehabilitation and reintegration program to persuade all 5 regions to send me their most heinous and hardcore criminals. That would have allowed me to expand the Sinner Army steadily and strengthen my forces under lawful pretenses. I was meant to make my true entrance when the 3 calamities overthrew the Masters, or when the second demon invasion descended, whichever came first. I would step in as the hero, and from there, ascend naturally to the ruler of the world. Instead, I had become the most heinous existence in the 5 regions. A world terrorist, an enemy greater than Gideon Grimm, greater than the emissary of light. Where did it all go wrong? I knew exactly who to blame for this, and yet I couldn't. All I could do was accept it as my punishment for being too greedy. Instead of choosing one, I chose all 3 of them, and in doing so, made my life 3 times harder. I stood there on the terrace as, one by one, the culprits behind my current predicament gathered at my side with the no intent of apologizing for the good deed they did. Others followed soon after. I kept my emotions tightly in check. This wasn't the time for an outburst. My people needed me now more than ever. I will deal with these 3 later. So, you all heard the decrees and counter-decrees, I said, skipping any pretense of small talk or making any attempt to assure them. Anyone who wants to leave may do so now. You'll receive your severance and compensation for the danger I've brought upon you and your families." I wasn't giving them a generous free pass. I was weeding out the weak links. "Boss, I think I can speak for everyone here," Aurelia said as she stepped forward, sweeping her gaze across the group. "If we wanted to leave, we wouldn't have come looking for you." "Slow down, kid," Chiron cut in calmly, speaking for her team before Aurelia could drag them into her confidence. "We're here for different reasons." "Who are you calling a kid?" Aurelia snapped, her voice dropping dangerously low. "Old hag, do you have a death wish?" She looked ready to throw hands with a demigod. I stepped between them at once. "Aurelia, go contact your mother and tell her to proceed as planned. There's no need to rush back over something this trivial. I'll speak with her personally tomorrow morning." Aurelia shot Chiron and the Western Princess one last glare before finally turning to me. She nodded in agreement and moved off to the side to complete my instructions ASAP. Then I turned to Chiron and the Western Princess and said evenly, "I'll deal with you two later. For now, observe all you want. But if you interrupt one more time, I'll make an example out of you." Chiron nodded. Together with the Western Princess, she stepped back, deliberately separating themselves from my people. I ignored them and addressed the rest. "Since none of you chose to leave, you have my thanks for placing your trust in me," I began. "First and foremost, the citizens are our priority. If anyone wishes to leave the city, buy their properties at a 10 to 20% markup and assist them in relocating to cities that still remember my grace." I continued without pause. "For those who intend to stay, instruct them to suspend all business and external operations for the next 2 days. The same applies to us. For anyone already en route, mobilize the center army to escort and protect them. Don't hesitate to use force if necessary. Aside from that, everything proceeds as usual. In 2 days, the royal families and the central government will be forced to reconsider their decrees and counter-decrees. And if anyone tries to stir trouble inside the city," I added calmly, "you already know what to do." I swept my gaze across them. If I missed anything, or if something wasn't clear, now's the time to ask. "Boss, honestly, you don't need to worry about the citizens of Sky Blossom City. We, the Bright Lions Gang, have strong public relations across every city under our control. Trust me, say the word, and they'll bear arms against the world for you," Aurelia said confidently as she returned after delivering my instructions to her mother. She casually paced past Chiron and the Western Princess, daring either of them to give her a reason. Her demeanor made it seem as though this were just another ordinary day for her. Seeing her like this, the others also appeared slightly relieved and more at ease. A subtle smile formed on my face as I listened to Aurelia. She was the clearest example of why I had entrusted the senior management of my organization to capable card apprentices I could rely on, rather than to my Calamity Daughter cores. Also, I don't believe anyone else could match Aurelia's growth within my organization. Maybe Jaya in terms of strength, but in my organization, not so much. It hasn't been long since she took over the Bright Lions Gang, yet she had enough confidence to claim she could get the cities, mostly second and third tier cities, whose underground was taken over by the Bright Lions Gang to rebel against all the governing bodies of the 5 regions. Even as a rookie in the gang, she focused on public relations and the well-being of the organization without anyone needing to tell her to. Through actively serving the citizens, taking on their problems as her own, and treating them like family, she steadily gained popularity. Her influence wasn't limited to Sky Blossom City, but extended to every city whose underground now fell under the control of the Bright Lions. On the day she challenged the Bright Brothers for leadership of the gang, citizens from all those cities gathered in Sky Blossom City to cheer for her. Honestly, she was like my gangster general. In her own way, she was following in her ancestors' footsteps, a path that had become a tradition for her family and for many families in Border City. Well, given Border City's financial hardship and infamy, most of its people could only secure stable livelihoods by joining the Southern Watch or the army. When neither Chiron nor the Western Princess reacted, Aurelia's eyes drooped in brief disappointment. She quickly shook it off and continued, "Boss, our Bright Lion Gang branches from other cities keep calling me, asking for permission to take over their respective cities and declare their undying allegiance to you." Ha ha ha. I laughed aloud, unable to stop myself. Realizing that I had underestimated my people, especially the younger generation. It seems their admiration for me is greater than that of their admiration for the Southern royal family. I couldn't help but tilt my head back and stare at the sky in melancholy, thinking that maybe this was for the best. There was no such thing as perfect timing for world domination. And if I was afraid to even voice intentions of it out loud, then perhaps it wasn't something that truly suited my appetite. I turned to Diana and asked, "Where does the fine gold stand?" "Awaiting your command," Diana replied. 3 words, but they were enough. Good, good, I said. Tell both the fine gold guards and the Bright Lions gang to stand down. They are not to take matters into their own hands. Have them lie low for the next 2 days. If there's an emergency, deploy the center army. Boss, are you sure? This is a good opportunity to overthrow the Southern royal family. Their pompous asses have already ruined the South enough. If they hadn't tried to act smart, the other regions wouldn't have had a reason to join hands against us. If you ask me, they did it on purpose. The only problem is, for the life of me, I can't figure out why they would do that, Aurelia said, her tone openly challenging, as she all but threw down the gauntlet against the Southern royal family while speculating about their motives. Understandable as of everyone present, she had the most reason to hate the Southern royal family. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned to Anna and, with a gentle smile, she added, "Sister-in-law, no offense. As the boss's general, I have to give him my honest opinion. What makes you think you're Wyatt's general?" Jaya snapped at Aurelia before Anna was given any chance to respond. "You still dare stand before me? It seems I haven't hooped your ass hard enough." Aurelia shot back instantly. She and Jaya had formed a rival bond through repeated clashes over the leadership of the Bright Lions gang. A Voltronian versus an Auriculian. Now that was a battle I would pay to watch. In terms of raw strength, Jaya was clearly superior, but when it came to skill and combat experience, Aurelia held a significant advantage. More importantly, Aurelia was willing to die to win and get what she wanted, while Jaya was not. Still, I had to give Jaya credit. She was shaping up to be a solid investment, and this rivalry with Aurelia was forging her character. She was no longer just Diana's baby sister. "Oh yeah? I'll whoop your ass hard enough to knock that delusion right out of you." Jaya shot back, glaring straight into Aurelia's eyes. "Cut it out." I stepped in, having let their banter continue long enough believing it was good for morale. Then I looked around at the others and asked, "Anyone else have anything to add?" "Wyatt, what about the VR universe?" Jill asked. Although she believed they had done nothing wrong, she didn't dare meet my eyes. That made me wonder whether it was really that obvious that I was upset with the 3 of them. I had thought I was hiding it well. In reality, I was being distant, but not because I was angry. The truth was that, even though I had found the courage to acknowledge that I wanted all 3 of them, I didn't dare stay close to any one of them, afraid of stirring resentment in the other 2. That choice left me holding a delicate bomb of my own making, and I had no idea how to defuse it. For now, I decided not to push my luck. "What about the VR universe?" Jill asked. It hadn't even made it onto the list of things I was concerned about. It was virtual, hosted within my personal realm network, and protected by the Devil Merchant Code. "Your dynamic currency system," Jill continued. "The exchange rates are going to crash. People will panic sell, fearing that once the central government and the royal families take control of the VR universe, they won't recognize trades and deals conducted under you." She had a valid point. What she didn't realize was that humans were greedy by nature. That hadn't changed in the past, wouldn't change in the present, and wouldn't change in the future. You're right about panic selling, but the exchange rate is stable and the currency value is steadily increasing. That's because the major noble and royal families, their branch families and allies, along with the top 10 universities and various hidden sects and clans, have begun investing heavily in the VR universe. Now that they've made up their minds to come after me together, they've started fighting over who gets how much of the VR universe. We have nothing to fear on that front. In fact, in a way, this is excellent for us, I explained, relying on the Hive Spirit's real-time reports. Isn't that a little presumptuous? They're acting like they've already won, Aurelia remarked, irritation flickering through her voice. Still, she was quietly relieved that their boss didn't need them to go to war, confident enough to handle the situation on his own. Despite all her bravado, Aurelia understood this was for the best. No one present knew the cost of war better than she did. Were the world leaders being presumptuous? No, they weren't. The fact that, despite their massive investments in the VR universe, the currency value rose steadily rather than skyrocketing proved they knew exactly what they were doing. Come tomorrow, even if the world governing bodies failed to act against me or collapsed disastrously in the attempt, their investments in the VR universe would remain safe and continue to grow. Either way, it was a win-win for them. At any other time, the VR currency value would have surged several-fold almost immediately. It didn't, because their aggressive buying pressure was counterbalanced by panic selling. That selling came primarily from common people, those who had invested in the VR universe early, back when most couldn't see its potential or were waiting for the central government to sanction it or outright steal it from me. It was saddening, but that was simply how the investment world worked. If they trusted me, they would hold. If they didn't, they would panic sell. That wasn't my problem to solve. Sooner or later, people would catch on, and it was only a matter of time before the VR currency value finally shot up. Thanks for the tip, boss. If the meeting's done, I have some urgent business to attend to. Aurelia said at once, reading everything she needed from my smile as she rubbed her hands together like a gambler at a roulette table who believed it was not gambling if she knew she was going to win. As the leader of the Bright Lions gang, she now handled its finances. It was a gang after all. It had no formal treasury or dedicated treasurer, which meant she directly controlled a vast pool of capital. In the past, the Bright brothers had simply left financial matters to Diana. Aurelia, however, was different. She had chosen to manage it herself. One of the perks of maintaining excellent public relations was that it allowed her to personally know small business owners across the cities, making it easy for her to identify which ventures showed real promise and could blossom into solid investments with proper support and encouragement. As a result, she began offering zero-interest loans with a 3 to 10-year principal return period in exchange for majority shares. In essence, she was a loan shark, but not the kind that grew by draining its borrowers dry. She grew alongside them. I glanced around at everyone. They all seemed calmer now, more confident, even a little eager and urgent, as if I was keeping them from something very important. I never knew my employees were so enthusiastic. Seeing that no one had any further issues to raise, I said, "So, I take it all of you know what you need to do. If something urgent comes up, you know where to find me. If I'm unavailable, contact them. You're all dismissed." With that, all of them hurried off to their posts, including Jill, Anna, and Susan. I was willing to go out on a limb and guess they all shared the same idea as Aurelia. No wonder they all seemed that eager to get back their work. I turned to Chiron and the Western Princess. They hadn't left, though the princess's bodyguards had. That alone said a lot, but I still asked, "Aren't you two following them?" "No. We invested all our savings into the VR universe the day we learned about it. We had planned to venture into the way beyond to earn more and invest further, but then Redfall happened, and so did you," Chiron said, her words carrying a trace of blame. She appeared proud of their foresight, yet at the same time faulted me for becoming an unexpected distraction to their plans. Funny thing is, I told those two they should invest in the VR universe. They didn't believe me, but the moment they heard you, they instantly regretted it. It was satisfying. Still, I gave them a 5-minute window to sort things out, the Western Princess, Christina, said, prompting me to raise an eyebrow. If I were in her position, I would have fired those guards and hired new ones. They had left their princess alone with someone who had threatened her just minutes earlier, all for the sake of money. That was simply unprofessional. As if reading my thoughts, Christina added, "Don't underestimate their loyalty to me. They would die for my amusement. It's just that they trust your strength too much. I convinced them to leave by telling them you were strong enough to kill all of us together without us even realizing it. So staying behind to guard me, while missing the opportunity to make the fortune of a lifetime, would be stupid. So, what is it you two wanted to talk to me about?" I asked, realizing I might have been too quick to judge Christina's guards. They were far more self-aware than I had given them credit for. "We wanted to talk you out of your plans for world domination," Chiron answered in a relaxed tone. "But after listening in on your little meeting, we no longer intend to. We now understand that you have no such plans." As she spoke, she summoned a canteen from her grimoire and took a sip. A faint fruity scent drifted through the air, leading me to guess it was wine. I shook my head firmly and clarified, "No, you've got it wrong. World domination is still on." "What? You're pulling our legs, right?" Christina was convinced I was joking, but when she saw the look in my eyes, her mouth fell open in shock. You're crazy. Wyatt, that's absurd. Every one of them will die because of your foolish ambitions. Put aside your massive ego for a second and think of these people who are willing to die for you and your vision. Chiron persuaded aloud, her voice edging toward hysteria. Even though she knew I was strong, this time I would be facing all the governing bodies of the 5 regions, and she had no confidence that I would come out on top without a series of miracles. No, no one will die. Everything will be clear to everyone in 2 days. Enjoy your front row seats to the new world order, I assured the nosy duo, all the while waiting for Field Marshal Lorne to contact me after reading the message I had sent to her Devil Merchant Codex several minutes earlier. Yeah, more like, in 2 days. Consider yourself lucky if this little city is still standing and not reduced to dust along with its citizens. Christina snapped in rage. She almost lunged at me, clearly wanting to punch my face, but Chiron pulled her back just in time. Wow, you two really have a death wish, I warned Christina and Chiron with my gaze before adding calmly. For your information, that's not going to happen. My people and I will take care of it. I had to reassure them because I had no intention of killing them. Like every favorite of the card Celestial, those two never liked sticking to the script and always managed to introduce an unexpected twist. Knowing them, they would try something reckless in the name of what they believed was right. Previously, I was counting on that tendency, hoping they would help me deal with some of the criminals the world leaders intended to send my criminal rehabilitation and reintegration programs way, particularly those who weren't actually guilty of any or major crimes and were simply people victims of difficult lives. Take the high school gang in the southern capital, for example. I hadn't met them myself, but Arya had sworn they'd done nothing wrong, and I trusted her judgment. After Anna, she was the only other unparalleled bloodline descendant I held in high regard. That little square, though uptight, was oddly adorable. I guess it was her sense of duty and righteousness. You and what people? Aurelia and the rest. Christina scoffed. I could slaughter them all, and they wouldn't even be able to put up a decent struggle. Who are you kidding? Do yourself a favor and just apologize paying some fines, she suggested, rigidly controlling every fiber of her body to stop herself from taking another swing at me. I shook my head with a quiet chuckle and replied in amusement. Those guys? Yes, they pack a punch, but I have bigger guns. The kind that will settle all this in 2 days. At that, Chiron and Christina exchanged a glance filled with disbelief. Even so, that didn't stop them from prying. Chiron asked, who? The Freedom Fighters? Redfall and Ian Widow. Nah. They've got their own responsibilities keeping them busy. I paused mid-sentence as my grimoire rang up with an incoming call from someone I never expected to hear from. Sansa Baylor. Seeing her contact ID, a single thought crossed my mind. Did she catch on to Henrix's attempt to rescue Ned? It was supposed to be a simple search and rescue mission, yet they still hadn't returned. No, if she had, Ned would be dead by now, and she would have made sure I knew it. That begged the question of why she was calling me. Was it to inform me of that? Or did she simply want to rub salt into my wounds? Sansa was a crazy woman. Aside from her infatuation with demigod Baylor, predicting her next move was nearly impossible. Either way, it wouldn't hurt to remind her of reality if she had forgotten it. I turned to Chiron and Christina, asked them to leave, warning, leave and don't try to pull anything for the next 2 days if you don't want to see me kill Cam and Ollie before killing you too. Chiron stared at me in silence. Had it been anyone else, she would have dared them to do it, trusting Cannibal Cam, her husband's other persona, not only to protect him but to tear their heads off. But I was different. My gaze alone terrified Cannibal Cam. Their brief exchange with me that day was still fresh in her mind, and Cam had confided the dread he felt when my gaze had pierced into him. That was why she didn't test my patience and immediately dragged Christina away while I was still asking politely. Chiron, what are you doing? If we let him do whatever he pleases, Christina protested, but she was easily overpowered. Chiron seized her and dragged her away as Christina continued complaining aloud. Shut up, Christina, Chiron snapped, cutting in. I don't mind dying, but I don't want to die knowing we got Cam and Ollie killed. However, both of them suddenly stopped in their tracks and turned back toward me, frozen in place as a surge of golden soul energy erupted from my head and condensed into a humanoid form. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Did you enjoy this video? If you did, make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And don't forget to subscribe and give this video a big thumbs up. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Thank you.